For those who don't know, Martin is, for me at least, most known for the funk flies, and has had several titles in several competitions. Like you told me, 3 European Championship titles, 3 World Championship titles. You've won the Mondial, the World Air Games, and that's just a few of them. So that's with the funk flies, and of course now you are in the last 10 years also very heavily known for the work in the tunnel and all your camera flying and the concepts. And I think for those who are involved in the freestyle world, of course, with the work that you have done, for example, with Will and Yo, that I believe are should be very thankful for what you've done with them. And so that's just a little intro, I guess, for who you are to me as well. And then maybe you can explain to me and to everybody what Martin Kristensen is. Like, not who, but what.
What is that's an interesting question. I don't know. From a skydiving point of view, my dad is also a skydiver, so he started skydiving in 89, and then in 90 I did my first tandem being 13, I think. And then I started skydiving myself when I was 18 in 94. And I started skydiving in a club that's like all Danish clubs back then, was really small.
So you only jump on the weekend, I guess?
Yeah, every second weekend, and in the summertime it was on Tuesdays. And this club was, we had a 172 Cessna. So it basically took 3 people up. So it was basically a accuracy kind of club.
Sure.
So my first, I don't know, I was focusing on accuracy jumping in the beginning.
And I guess you had to do your own manifest and so on. It wasn't like a club like we know nowadays, right?
No. You write your name on the board and then you see what level you end up on there. Yeah, it was quite a super nice vibe. Like the drop zone style back then was pretty cool. But obviously, if you wanted to become a good skydiver, it wasn't gonna happen there.
Sure.
And then I started. There was this Danish thing, Henrik and Pernille Herold. Most people would know about these guys today, but they were running it wasn't exactly a boogie thing. They called it Let's Boogie, but there was a kind of a big way belly formation training school in a way. So they were traveling around in Denmark and a little bit abroad as well. That I kind of joined just to participate, and then later they taught me a little bit more about the organizing side of it, and I started doing camera work. That was basically when I started doing camera work. Henrik, he used to do the same or these type of things that Bruno Broken is doing, or has been doing since back then.
Sure.
Filming the big waves and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So he basically taught me. He built my first camera helmet together with me and like all this kind of stuff now.
Yeah.
So that's how I started with the camera work. And Niels, my teammate, he I don't know exactly when he started skydiving actually, but it was a few years later. He's a couple of years younger than me, and he probably started 2 years later. But anyway, he came from gymnastics. He was on the Danish national team, I think, in gymnastics. So body control, all this kind of stuff, he basically had from the beginning.
You mean the body awareness, the body control, all the little body abilities that he then put into skydiving?
Yeah, just like he basically came straight from being a semi-professional gymnast.
Yeah.
And started skydiving. I think he must have been 18 when he started.
Yeah.
So he was quite spot on from the beginning. He could pretty much do anything. So he never went through all the belly stuff that I did.
Okay.
So he started.
It's a little bit like Yoabi, I suppose, right? Who also straight just jumped into mostly the freestyle things, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. He also comes from gymnastics and.
Yeah. I think his specialty is trampolining.
Ah, but perfect. Yeah.
But I think I met Niels in 96, 97 probably. Mm-hmm. On some small drop zone in Denmark, other place where he started skydiving.
You just found some weird crazy gymnast dude who just wanted to send it.
Yeah, I mean back then, like it wasn't that normal that young people like us started skydiving. It was mostly older people and
Yeah.
or older people like my age now.
Yeah.
And often you want to hang out with more similar age kind of people when
Of
you
course.
skydive, no?
Sure. Yeah.
And I mean, I had good fun. I we had like a Danish national team 16 way that I was on for a little bit.
Okay.
And we did 40 way competition in the land, like this kind of stuff. No, but
It doesn't even exist anymore, does it?
I doubt it. I
That's
mean, I
such
don't
a
know what the
shame.
belly flies are doing. It's a different thing. There's not that many new belly flies anymore that go big, right?
It's also sad because there's a lot of people that actually don't free fly. They just do something. I don't know what they all do, but
A
it's
lot
a
of
shame
people
that
have
they
fun
don't at least-
skydiving, just jumping out of the plane.
Yeah. It's a shame though. I mean, like, even if it's belly flying, I can't say I'm the largest admirer of belly flying, but doing 16 ways must be pretty cool.
It was a good learning experience. I would say like the most benefit I had from doing it was the what we today in the tunnel would call low speed start to the
Yeah.
to my flying, right?
Yeah, and especially you then doing camera, you're just hanging out in the burbles the entire time, so you just get to...
Yeah, I did the most of what I did with the big waves was either participating or organizing.
Okay. Yeah.
We would be traveling around in Denmark, and I would everything from like a caravan to like a twin otter full or skyvan or something like this.
Sick.
And then organizing belly flying is kind of like jumping out and then waiting for people to show up, right?
Sure, I suppose.
Most of the time, if you build formations of like 15 to 30, then you're gonna do 1 point, maybe maximum, no?
Yeah, I suppose.
So I got kind of like over that pretty fast, you know, like being in free fall, but waiting for other people to do what we needed to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
And with meeting Nils, he was pretty early sure that what he wanted to do was freestyle.
Yeah.
Free fly was just a thing then. It was kind of not really something that a lot of people did.
Yeah, at that point it was just like the Olaf crew and people doing maybe already the space games, what they called, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But that
there
was
was a
small
little
crowd of
bit.
people in
Yeah, it was
America at that point, I guess.
very small group of people. When I met him was a Go Vertical in Spain. Well, we met before in Denmark, but he was there. He was gonna stay there for a few months.
Yeah.
And I came down there with this belly group. And very quickly I got over being part of this. So then I just told the organizers, like, don't count on me. I'm gonna be there once in a while, but I'm gonna jump with the other guys now. And then we started free flying a little bit, and it's like through this it was kind of like figuring out what it means to be in other orientations than the belly.
Yeah.
And then he was like, I think I can sort out you know, like some type of a sponsorship with the Jan Wilgruber, who had the drop zone back then there. And he was like, oh yeah, for sure, you guys can come and train. And then we were like, okay, but let's do it then. So then we agreed to line up for the 99 World Championship in Australia. And that was kind of the beginning of this.
But at that point, you guys have, like, you have one guy who's a gymnast with probably pretty little skydiving experience, and then you've got another guy who's basically a belly flyer.
Yeah.
So, and that's which year right now that we're talking, when you guys actually started jumping together?
Yeah.
Which year is that?
What year? We must have started jumping together in like 97, 98.
Okay, and you basically sign up for like 99 being your first big competition. So you've got a year and a half-ish thing to start coming up with an entirely new concept, an entirely new way of creating a routine, something that hasn't really been seen before. Where,
well, at first I would say we didn't know what freestyle was.
Yeah.
We just know that like we looked at some other people now, but like if you read the rules, then it looks weird. Like what is freestyle now?
Exactly.
So in the 99, we just read through the difficulty score sheet, and then we're just like, okay, we're gonna do this one and this one and this one now.
Yeah.
And it was kind of it went pretty good for like not knowing what freestyle was.
At
We
that
came
point, freestyle was what?
fifth.
It was like Marco Mana.
Marco Mano was like a,
The
I
top.
would say from our point of view, or maybe especially Nils' point of view, that was like, okay, he's the benchmark of
Perfect.
what to do.
Yeah.
There was Omar.
Yeah.
Omar was a little bit more, especially he had his style in a way, but then in the 99 when we participated, they kind of did something new that, if anything, you could say that maybe our later type of freestyle were based a little bit on what they just did a lot of eagles.
Yeah.
And the 99 was a really good experience for us. We came fifth, which was like, to us, that was like a real surprise. Now, like, how do we end up fifth? We're like not even close to being good now. But then after this, we were basically, since I came from this belly flying organizing kind of thing, I was like, I'm not gonna do the typical camera flyer freestyle team thing. So
What do you mean by that? Is you don't want to just lay on your belly and film somebody who spins in a circle?
Yeah. Back then, most of the camera flyers, they would be in what you would consider like a belly team wingsuit. You know, like the one with the big wings on the arms, but not the legs. That would be the freestyle camera flying kind of similar. They would be slightly different, but all sorts of weird arm wingsuits that people were using back then.
Yeah, and the routine would be mostly based around like having a performer and then somebody filming whatever is being performed.
Yeah, a little bit more like what you see in the tunnel, and then like the camera flyer would do what the audience is doing.
Yeah.
But basically just be there.
Yeah.
And this for me was like, I'm not gonna do this.
Because you've had enough time spent laying on your belly and waiting.
Yeah, I could do this already. I wanted to learn to fly, you know.
Exactly.
So then between 99 and 2000 we picked up this like, okay, now we have to figure out what is going to be what we want to do.
Yeah.
And Nilsi could kind of do it all already. So we just had to figure out a nice way to present what we wanted to show.
Yeah.
And I would say we kept a kind of like a red thread through all of the years that we competed, but obviously it improved.
Mm-hmm.
We when was that, like I think 2003 or something like this, we went to Florida for training, and then we met Fabian Reidel, and he was like, you guys should come to the tunnel. So we went to this 12-footer in Orlando.
With the 2 doors.
Yeah. And Bozo was like, that's cool, but this we cannot, I mean, that's not gonna help us at all, no?
Yeah.
So we just tried it and left it alone. So next time we went to the tunnel, but I think we already stopped competing at that point. Yeah. The tunnel in Eloy was going to be built for the 2005, but that was our last year of competing.
Yeah.
So then that was the first real tunnel, I would say.
But I also have a feeling that not having had tunnels, like I'll get to that later, I think, because I don't want to change the subject too much, but I also think that was in your favor. In the sense that you just kind of started exploring how skydiving is supposed to work, and especially how the interaction between 2 people is going to go. And I think that if you had gone to the tunnel, you might have started going a bit too much back into this original type of performer does most of the work, and then I don't know if you would have been able to figure out your work as a camera fly in the tunnel. Like, it's maybe better that you had the sky for that, right?
For sure. I would say like all of the flying that I do, both skydiving and tunnel flying nowadays, is based on me being a camera flyer, skydiving camera flyer.
You've said that to me a few times, yeah. Makes also a lot of sense in the way that I watch how you fly and how you interact also with the students, and the way that you approach, I guess, your general concept of flying.
Yeah. I mean, when I'm teaching in the tunnel, it's with obviously that the tunnels has evolved a lot of what people do in the tunnel, but it's still based on the tunnel being a free fall simulator of some kind, that what people do in the tunnel is gonna train them to become better skydivers.
Yeah, exactly.
Or at least the free fall part of it.
Yeah.
So I use all of those kind of things. Yeah.
Yeah, for me it's a tunnel simulator.
Yeah.
It trains people to tunnel fly better when they go skydive.
Yeah. But I like that. So my whole idea about what we do in the tunnel is that if you don't see the one you fly with, then you cannot use this way of flying in the sky, because then whoever you're gonna fly with is not gonna be there when you try and find them.
Absolutely. I mean, it's also, if you're gonna follow a tandem and you just want to film them, then you're not gonna do a front layout just looking somewhere else than the tandem. No, you're gonna probably float around them and go over them. So it's kind of that's just for me common sense.
And the way Nils was flying the routine, for those that have seen some of our routines, they would see that we set it up so that he is the performer, and the performer is basically facing the audience, which would then in freefall be me, but presented through the video.
Exactly. So he wanted to
constantly get an idea that he's actually performing for whoever's watching.
Exactly. So you had interaction with him the whole time, which I think was missing before that. The performer was just doing its own thing.
To some extent.
Yeah.
But yeah, for sure, that was our main focus, I would say. That our, like, the things that we went through when we were just trying to figure out what to do would be based on that there has to be movement in the frame.
Yeah.
And he needs to orientate himself towards the camera when he's not flipping or spinning.
Yeah.
So in that sense, there would be constantly either me carving or doing eagles, or him moving around in the frame, or both.
Yeah.
So we never really have the backdrop static, unless we would go tracking.
Sure.
Which were almost not happening in the free routine.
I think the real question that I am curious about, as a coach myself, and seeing a lot of people, especially nowadays, with actually a lot of airtime from the tunnel, how is it that you, without a tunnel, and Niels could just figure out what you have figured out? So as you described, you come from belly flying, and all of a sudden here you are filming a routine, doing eagles, carving. How come people don't figure this out now? It's so, for me at least, it was fairly intuitive. I want to just move around that person, and so eventually I figured out maybe where I have to go with my weight, or where I have to push. How do you reckon you figured that out? Like, what was the steps to, like, one day just do a front layout around Niels, or what happened? Like, what switched on in your brain? How did you approach it?
When we were training, like we I don't know, most of the teams nowadays, they allocate certain time frames to go and train.
Yeah.
We were living on the drop zone for most of the year, so we would be making our money packing cannabis and then spending them training.
Yeah.
So we would kind of constantly be in a training mode.
Yeah.
So we would go and do, like, say, 1 week we would just do carving, and then we would figure out what we could achieve in carving.
But how did you do that together? So you exited holding on to each other, and then you just started somehow carving on the back, or what was the initiation of the whole thing?
In the beginning it was ridiculous. We would for sure achieve like 200-300 meter distance now, and just like zoom around like idiots, and not knowing how to get closer, right?
Yeah.
But then at one point that became very easy, of course, right? But that was like the approach to getting there was something I would not necessarily advise today.
Yeah.
But then that would kind of be it, right? So we would spend 1 week and try and figure out, like, what can we do in eagles and what can we do in tracking, and then we would pick out certain things. So it's like this looked good, or this was easy, or we like this kind of combination.
Yeah.
And then try and do multiple things, and then we would start trying to mix them, and our real focus would then be the transitions in between.
Perfect.
Eagles and carving, or carving and tracking, and
well, and also for Niels to actually start doing what he wanted to originally do, right? To basically incorporate his acrobatic skills. Yeah,
because he wanted to do. If you see some of the stuff Marco Mano did, it was completely ridiculous now.
Mm-hmm.
Like, completely, he would be doing like long flipping sequences with lots of different kind of twists, and while doing this, he would be checking the altimeter to see if it was still good to go.
Yeah.
So Niels was like, yeah, he's for sure the best. I want to do something like this, and I would say like, you can do that, but I'm not gonna be just sitting over here watching you. So I'm just gonna see what's possible with fall rate changes and like losing balance and kind of like bouncing around, and then me trying to compensate for his relative movement, and then trying to maintain somewhat the proximity and framing. All of this took a bunch of time, of course.
Of course it did well, but at the same time it didn't, because basically that really happened between 1999 and 2001. You think about it, that's it's a couple hundred jumps probably, right?
Oh, we did quite a bit of jumping, but I don't know, like maybe the first couple of years we did like 300-400 training jumps before competition.
I know people that are really bad at flying. They have a lot more jumps than that, right? So that's the impressive part, where I sometimes just don't exactly know where it comes from. Like, how is it that you just started figuring out, all right, I want to carve around him, or I want to do a front layout, and it just actually ended up happening? And how is it that there are people that rely so much on somebody telling them how to do it, instead of just being like, okay, I'm just going to try this? I don't know.
I did a lot of different types of sports growing up, and before I started skydiving, I would have gone through most of the available type of sports.
So like what, for example?
Football, swimming, badminton, volleyball, basketball.
So there's a bunch.
Taekwondo.
There's a mixture of coordinational skills in there, of physical abilities, of movement abilities, of strength elements and everything. So your body's just primed to move. It's primed to for body awareness, I suppose.
In my coaching in the tunnel, I use a lot of these things of like riding a half pipe or skating or this type of thing. And
you told me about that.
Trampolining, like all kids do trampoline, and at some point, like not necessarily to the level of but you can jump on a trampoline, right?
You can bounce a bit and understand your sense of balance, sure. Yeah.
I mean, I don't know.
Can you just elaborate the half pipe analogy for me one more time? Because I don't know if everybody knows it, and I love it. Well, actually, we're gonna get to that maybe later when we're back, but we're more in the tunnel subject.
Yeah. I mean, it's very simple in a way, but I think it makes a lot of sense for especially the visual side of what a tunnel provides.
Sure.
But all this is just like little bits that kind of comes together, and I don't know, like I don't feel like we did anything special. We just had fun doing what we like to do, you know.
Yeah.
And it does look, if you look back in time and see some of the previous freestyle routines from other teams, that we somehow managed to change a little bit the course of what freestyle was going to be like.
Yeah.
And even though it might not look exactly the same as what we used to do, it looks more like what we used to do than what other people used to do. For
sure. And yet somehow I find that looking at certain people, they lack that interaction. And then I sometimes wonder why that is. I mean, like we stand on the shoulders of giants in a lot of things, and that's how, I mean, human society has been just, growing and becoming smarter, because you learn kind of from what people have been doing before you. And yet somehow if I look at flying, that's not necessarily happening, that people say, okay, well, here's this awesome thing, let's take that and make it better. So quite often I see people,
I would definitely say we benefited when we started freestyling. There was a whole freestyle community in Denmark.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you know them, but there's Jakob Rasten and Thomas Vens.
No.
They were really good freestylers.
Yeah.
And they were I would say they were fertilizing the Danish freestyle community back then, and we were obviously benefited from that.
Yeah.
So we for sure learned from what they already did. They were the national team back then. So when we started our thing, it wasn't like we started blank, I would say.
Sure.
It was much harder. Like nowadays, you just go like search on YouTube or Google or whatever, and you find all you want to find.
But that's exactly the point I'm making, right? Like the information is out there, and then I still watch somehow. I mean, you can even see, for example, take Maya and Maidis as an example, that are now planning on going back into, or actually starting their skydiving competition things. They have put some effort into this. I know they have gotten some coaching from, I think, Yo or from Will, I'm not sure. And you see them starting to interact a lot more than what you usually see.
The
And
problem though with this discipline, at least traditionally, I would say, is that it's like people would back when we were competing. I would be Nils's camera flyer, right? I wouldn't be Martin.
Yeah.
That kind of came in later, like Nils and Martin, or they would often switch our names.
Sure.
But I maybe a little bit my approach in going away from wanting to just lay and watch people skydive with a camera on to like wanting to fly. Nils, he had to basically look at me because otherwise I would be somewhere else. So what we ended up doing, which I think most of the teams didn't do and probably still don't, is that I as a camera flyer would be the leader.
Yeah.
As if you would compare it to the tunnel, then I would be leading him flying after me.
Yeah.
And then I would just set him up to do his tricks in the right place.
Yeah.
So basically me leading, like say if it would be a tracking jump or some type of whatever that is today, he would just have to look at me and follow. And then I would set him up through eagles or carving or whatever to be able to do his.
And I've seen you do that even with groups of 6 people, right? Like you can create.
Yeah.
You can
with the right
certain,
level.
Exactly, with the right level, sure.
Yeah,
But I mean, you can force certain lines to happen for the person following you very easily.
Yeah.
Just by going from one direction to another, for example, going over them, going under them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's for sure it's my preferred way of skydiving.
Yeah.
Like, if you participate in a competition, you can call it freestyle, but otherwise, then it's just a two-way.
Sure.
And then you add whatever word you want to it.
Exactly. Yeah.
I did a lot of organizing in skydiving, right? Like more than I needed to, and everything I wanted to do was to make people fly faster.
Yeah.
And I think that's where you learn to fly, really. Like flying slow is not really. It's not where you push your own limits or abilities. So that's basic. I would say that's the base of our type of freestyle, that we would set it up so he has to follow me, which obviously makes it a lot easier for me to frame.
Absolutely.
And like this, you just find, and like with the base of we have to change so that the background moves.
Yeah. Then
you can only carve for so long before that gets lame, and then you have to switch to the next thing, and then.
Because that's kind of also what I see now, even with I mean, I was using Mighty's and Maya as an example earlier, and they will progress immensely throughout the next few years, I'm sure. But it's still sometimes primitive like that it's mostly based around, okay, there's just some carving and a person performing in the middle, and I have seen them interact with each other a lot, so there's like they're gonna do great things for sure very soon. But generally speaking, that's kind of what I see, right? Exactly what you say. You see the same background, you see the same kind of carve, sometimes just the same direction, and it just gets also just, for me at least, it just gets boring.
But I think it's mostly based on the performer on a freestyle team is typically the one that wants the team to happen, which is the kind of personality who has already an idea of what they want to do, and then they find someone who wants to film, and then the one who films is basically just filming.
Exactly, yeah.
And I think that's where we would differ from the classic way of approaching this.
Absolutely. Makes a lot of sense. Now, you didn't really answer my question of what is Martin Kristensen? What is that brand? Like, if it was a brand, what would it represent if people were talking about it? And I think just to spark an idea to the people listening now, if I'm not mistaken, how many jumps do you have in total?
Somewhere between 9 and 10,000 probably.
So you have, if I'm not mistaken, 1 cutaway, right? And that happened like last year, I believe.
No, I have 4 now.
You have 4 cutaways.
Yeah.
Okay, but 4 cutaways to 10,000 jumps.
I have we can avoid mentioning the company names, but I had three tension knots.
Okay.
Or actually I have quite a bunch, but 3 of them turned into cutaways. So but that is if you can rule that out as a malfunction, that's just bullshit equipment, and then I have an actual line twist.
Okay. Gotcha.
On a different kind of canopy.
But still, what I'm trying to get at is 10,000 jumps, 4 cutaways, so there's more than I thought actually. Differs quite a lot from the usual statistics, and it differs quite a lot from I guess, the usual mindset of skydivers, because I believe that it is also based on the mindset that there's a statistic of having X amount of cutaways per X amount of jumps, which is, I believe the statistic is 1 cutaway per 1,000 jumps.
Yeah.
So you're well below that statistic, and I think for me at least, it somewhat represents also a part of that brand and that character. There's just like a certain type of organization in your brain and structure and doing things clean and good, and like we spoke about before, like things are just done not half-assing, right?
Yeah. I mean, recently I had some pack jobs done, but I always packed for myself. Like I always
Pack jobs get sketchy, huh? Like I have.
It's not for me.
It's not for me.
I worked as a packer for quite a long time, I would say. I mean, I probably packed 50,000 cannabis or something like this, including my own.
Mm-hmm.
And my own malfunctions are the only ones I made. But I think that it's partly trying to do it neatly enough that it's not obviously going to be a malfunction, but also a lock is involved now.
Yeah, for sure. I mean,
but for my own bit, I would say there is probably like the normal amount of malfunctions that I could have had.
Yeah.
That I fought my way out of somehow.
Yeah, but that's another thing that I believe most people are just also not able to fix malfunctions. I've had quite a few tension knots. And I've never, for example, chopped any of my tension knots. So that's not true. I've chopped one on the JFX once, but on, for example, my current canopy on the Leia, I must have several thousand jumps on it. I have never chopped it, just because when there was a tension knot, I just stalled the shit out of the canopy to the point that it just couldn't go anywhere, and then I could fix the tension knot. So I think that very, very often, like, we don't need to talk about whether tension knots are good or bad, because obviously let's avoid them if we can. And so then, yes, it's a matter of probably equipment and such things, but I believe that most people are simply, they're not ready to fight the tension knot. I mean, it can go way out of hand, but like I've seen some pretty sketchy things that could have been avoided really easily by just...
People approach the opening in different ways, but I've always been looking at my opening.
Yeah.
I wouldn't necessarily advise that, but when I pull my hack sack out, I pull it out so that I have it in my hand, and I look at it, throwing it away.
And you follow it.
And then I look at it so I see the back leave the container.
But that can't be advised to most people, because they're gonna have like they're gonna start turning in a circle, or they're gonna have like.
I'm not an instructor of skydiving, and I would say like the main reason for that is that I always wanted to focus on the type of skydiving that is already past where you need an instructor.
Yeah.
And also I want to be able to do it my way, like fully, not have to follow some national or world system of like, this is how we teach.
Yeah.
I as you progress through skydiving, you figure out new things all the time if you're active, and then you find out that this is nicer now, or this or whatever. Like nowadays, for example, people route the bridle different to the pin, or not different. Parachute de France already did it like this.
You mean that you go from the bottom instead of going over the top? Yeah.
And then there's some people say it's better than this or whatever. No, I still do it the way that I prefer.
Yeah.
And also I'm not really ready to, for example, try the mutant harness. It's not necessary for me at this stage.
Yeah, I think that's also one thing for me where I thought about this recently. I guess I'm constantly, for example, curious about going a step further. So that's...
if you fly all the speed wings and paragliding and all this, I think it's a less of a transition, but I don't really do this. And changing the emergency procedure at this point is not really me.
Yeah, and things can get really sketchy pretty quickly. Like just very recently, old friend of mine from Dubai, Abdul Bari, had a pretty bad malfunction with the mutant harness, and I mean it's a very, let's say, advanced piece of equipment. But I personally, for example, am very curious now to actually play with that, just because why not? It's there. So it's
when you see people come in for landing, it's obviously better.
When you see people mount, like, man, when you see Claudio Cagnasso, like yesterday we did a little mountain flight here in Voss, and if you compare the like, he's on a Valkyrie 75 and I'm on a Leia 75. If you compare, like, he obviously is a way better canopy pilot than me, a lot more current, and he's on the mutant. But if you compare just what he does there and the performance he gets out of it, and the maneuverability and just like the range, it's like triple. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Like it's absolutely absurd how much more he gets out of that line than me.
Yeah, but like the angle of the body with the wind resistance and all this, I mean, people choose thin lines.
Yeah.
Or thinner lines to have better performance and take off the slider and stuff like this.
Exactly.
But if you can change the angle of your body, that's gonna do way more than any of those things.
Yeah. Well, I just started actually after I spoke to Julian Bartel. He gave me some really interesting tips on how to actually recover my wing. And so I actually happen to have a very interesting modification on my rig, on the Vector that I have from 2015, that just I did it because a friend of mine recommended it to me, and at that point I had no idea why, but it's actually amazing. So I have the 3 rings, they're sitting quite a lot lower than they usually would.
Yeah.
And then I have a much longer yoke, so the rig just sits deeper, like lower.
Yeah.
So if I open it up, it's really, it ends up being a lot more like from the hip than it is anywhere else. Like it doesn't hang from the shoulders per se.
Yeah.
And so because of that kind of format, more than with a normal rig anyways, I can actually change a lot of the canopy's performance just by changing my center of gravity, like where I lean. So for example, now I started recovering the canopy mostly by just leaning backwards a lot and pulling my knees up, and then I try to get into like a mutant position, and it works magic. So I don't even want to know how much better it's gonna be if I try a mutant where I actually lay flat.
But it's I mean, it looks like it's easy to fly and safe as well, right?
Yeah, well,
it's just more power.
You do have to go a lot lower because you recover quicker because you're faster and because you have less drag on your body. So I think.
But I mean, I think you have to go through some kind of a course to be allowed to jump it.
Yes.
And they're not gonna let people who's not ready to do it do this course.
You actually have to apply. So you send an application, and then Pete Allen is actually the head of that, and he evaluates whether or not, I guess, you're suitable for the product, and then you do have to go through a course, and then it's quite the mission.
But I think that's smart when you change, because it's not just a different way of sitting in the harness, it's also the emergency procedure.
In that place,
things are located in a different place.
Exactly.
There's a bunch of things that's relevant.
I think that's this malfunction I just spoke about. That's exactly what happened. That Abdul Bari actually ended up not being able to cut away, from what I heard. Just because, man, I don't know anything about that rig, so I can't speak about it. But yeah.
But there's a lot of things with this. Like, my way of thinking, my skydiving is based on how I feel the best. Not necessarily that this is now they found that this is a better way of doing it, and I adapt to it.
Yeah.
If I think that it's better for me, then I try to adapt.
Yeah, and for sure I try to go down that a bit as well, but then there's also the constant curiosity, right?
Yeah.
There's this constant there's other things to play with, just like, I actually would like to learn freediving or speed riding or paragliding, just because it's another element of, let's say, fluid mechanics, right? It's just another part of what's possible thanks to aerodynamics and whatnot. So it's cool.
Yeah, I mean, I'm 46, so I'm not there anymore where I feel that I need to push myself the whole time.
Yeah.
I'm somewhat content in what I'm able to do.
Yeah.
And I still try to progress, but my main focus with flying is the freefall part of it.
Of course.
And the canopy side of it, here in Voss, there's quite a few places where we can go and fly the mountains, and I did a lot of this in the past, but I feel like I'm past it.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna go any harder than I used to.
Yeah.
So if I do, I mostly jump out and just fly in the valley, because I don't necessarily feel the need to get the
trees.
Yeah, like the adrenaline of being close.
Sure.
Doesn't weigh enough over the risk of me not. I'm not jumping that much as I used to, right? So I mostly feel not current enough to do certain types of risks.
I understand exactly what you mean. I mean, that's the reason I, for example, choose not to base jump, is because I can feel every mountain run I do, every speed flight I do, every speed flight I've done in the last 2 weeks, 3 weeks here in Voss, I've touched trees, you know. I can't help it. just
But that's my thing too, right?
yeah, exactly. So then you just have to know your limits and your own stupidity, which in my case is quite grandiose.
Yeah. Like for those that know the areas of flying here in Voss, I prefer to fly the waterfall
Yeah.
because it's mostly like an attacking route.
Mm-hmm.
It's very short or fast or whatever you would call that, but it's super nice to fly, but it's basically based on hook turns.
Yeah.
But it has this aspect for me that in my head it's a similar thing to our free routine, that I already know in my head what I'm gonna do when, because I've flown it enough times that I know exactly the line and the weather conditions allow me to do certain things.
Yes.
So then I rather do this than try and fly close down in a crack or something like this.
Yeah, I understand.
No,
Yeah, as I said, there's a reason I don't base jump.
I never tried base jumping, and that was actually an agreement with my dad very early that we're not gonna go to that step.
Yeah.
We lost some friends to base jumping when before I turned 20. And that was kind of like, yeah, no, that's not necessary for me. Same with tandem. Lost one of my
You mean being a tandem instructor?
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of my basically my main instructor, he died in a tandem fatality. So like a bunch of little things I decided quite early, like out of principle, I'm just gonna decide that this and this and this I'm not gonna do.
And it's okay too, because I guess you can find quite a lot of other things that have a better risk reward ratio. So
Yeah,
right,
exactly.
like that is still gonna bring you a lot of pleasure. Like I have that for me as well. Even in terms of skydiving, the last years I actually skydived a lot less. I also stopped load organizing quite a bit just because I guess I really want people to progress a lot. So I push them a lot,
Yeah.
but then you put yourself in kind of a risky situation all the time. Like the kind of jumps I'm making people do, I put quite a bit of trust in their capabilities, or at least in their common sense and competence and not being retarded. So I know also, like in the last 1 month, all the jumps I did, it's like, man, I feel people zoom around me pretty hard. And so I had a few years where I just ended up, for different reasons, putting my time into other stuff. So in my case, that was martial arts, for example, and then at some point you all of a sudden replace the time you spent skydiving with whatever else, and all of a sudden it's just replaced. So you just do these things, and then you all of a sudden jump a lot less. Now I'm trying to reverse it a bit and find a better balance, but yeah. And I think for you it's the same. I've seen you go free dive a lot. I've seen you do in the winter. I mean, you kind of go seasonal, right? So wherever you are, you take the activity that.
When I first started, I tried to do quite a bit, but in recent years, it's only maybe like one trip or two trips. So when the weather is or the water level in the rivers here is allowing it, then I try to go in like as much as I can.
Yeah. And now when you do that, how much of that is fueled by your interest in streamlining and in like, you know, diving through water?
I would say, well, so like the I mean, I always like to be in water, like probably most people. But when we first started freediving, it was because my wife wanted to go surfing.
Okay.
So then my idea was that if we're gonna go surfing, then we need to at least be able to hold our breath underwater for quite a while. So then we went to take the freediving course, and then with that in mind, my main focus was gonna be doing the freediving with some level of skydiving approach. So I basically wanted to figure out what does it feel like to be in free fall in water.
Yeah. And for that, you kind of have to go deep.
Then you have to go deep enough,
Yeah.
And I wouldn't say that that's what I prefer the most of it. I've never freedived enough to really go into the competition type of mindset of trying to go deeper and push myself like this. I think also they are more into the visual side of it. One of the places we've been going, they have a shipwreck at the 30 meters, which is the perfect depth in a way, and then swim into the boat and just know the line around.
Man, but 30 meters is already a lot. I mean, 30 meters to then play around on a boat.
To a non-free diver, it seems like it's quite deep, but to a free diver, it's quite a comfortable depth.
Okay. How much
if you go up and down, if you just go down a rope and come back up again straight away, it takes about a minute.
Sure, but then that's what I'm
down to
saying. If
30
you then end
meters.
up playing on the boat, staying down there, like how
Yeah, but
much?
that's what I mean. So if you just go down and come back up again, that
Yeah.
takes a minute.
Yeah,
But
and then it's
if
your
you are a
choice if you
current
stay
free
in.
diver, you can stay down for 2-3 minutes.
Yeah.
So you have plenty of time to kind of spend on the bottom there.
How does that look in terms of, let's say, rescue missions? If you would have a problem while you're in the boat that you're exploring at 30 meters, like, are you just
But there is people
fucked,
like you
or-
always have safety.
Okay.
Like you never dive without safety, basically.
Yeah, you always
I mean,
have a
you-
friend.
It's a thing. Like I would say, like don't go base jump on your own.
Yeah.
You don't go free dive on your own. Like there's a
Yeah.
bunch of things you don't do on your own. So there will always be people around, and you have a verbal plan on like this is what I'm gonna do on this particular dive.
Yeah.
So whoever's around, they know that I'm gonna go in from this end, and then I'm gonna go through like this. So in case I wouldn't come out, then at least they know that I'm not just gone.
Yes. You got swallowed by the water.
Yeah, but it does happen that people go freediving in groups and just like in the ocean, and then they forget this part of it, and then
Yeah.
one is not there anymore.
Yeah.
And once they're not there anymore, you're not gonna find them in the ocean.
Exactly.
So this is, I feel that's quite safe. To most people that are not freediving, 30 meters sounds like that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
But it's that's very achievable.
Yeah. Well, for me, I've always really wanted to get into it, and because I had some lung problems, I'm not supposed to go really deep anymore. As a kid, I did a bunch of freediving, and with my siblings, we did some stupid stuff. Like, you know, well, actually, it wasn't stupid at all, but we watched Le Grand Bleu, like, yeah, and like, you know how they go down with the elevator. So we kind of, yeah, but you know, like, so we kind of grew up on the ocean, or on the sea. Actually, we grew up on the water, and like, yeah, we would, for example, take a kayak that we found, and we would just fill a sack of whatever with rocks, and then we would just go buy a 20-meter rope. And then,
but that's a good way to get down.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's a really good way of getting down.
If you can
like,
equalize, good.
Yeah, well, we were water kids, you know.
Yeah,
we were playing around in the water a lot, but yeah, we would do that kind of stuff on like no end. We would just throw ourselves down there, and we did, and then, you know, find like a little cave at 20 meters, and then try to go.
No.
I couldn't possibly do that. So
Cave diving is different, I would say. That's because then you get all the silt.
Yeah.
And then, for those that know what Babylon used to be, Tom and Kure and those guys, Wolf, they were freediving a lot in Ampuria. There's some really good spots there.
There must be, of course.
They had one particular incident where death was like basically very close.
Okay.
So freediving in caves, I would definitely not recommend.
Yeah.
But in a rack where the rack is kind of set up for that particular purpose, then it's pretty safe.
Yeah. Yeah, I get it. And how you reckon is water similar to the air that we're using? Because it's not like I'm not asking if water and air are the like same thing. It's more in terms of the air that we end up playing with, which is moving quite fast. So it has density and it has pressure, at least to the sensation that we have. How similar do you find water to air? You know what I mean?
Yeah, if you think of free falling in water, then you can't achieve the speed that allow you to move around like we can in free fall, skydiving, or in the tunnel. But the way you would manipulate your body to change directions and stuff is like that's almost the same or similar, or based on the same thing.
So based on that, I assume, because I have found from my experience that people that swam a lot or feel comfortable in water end up usually feeling quite comfortable also in flying, in tunnel flying or skydiving.
Yeah.
So you reckon that also must have played a role in your skydiving and flying career, that you said you swam as a kid a lot, right?
I would think so. Yeah. I mean, it's one of the questions that I typically ask my students in the tunnel if we haven't flown together before. What type of other sports that they've done, and if they feel comfortable in water, and these kind of things. Because if you know how to balance your body good in water while moving, then you should be able to do the same in the wind.
100%. That's what I found also. For example, skateboarders, surfers, but skateboarders, you know how they're just not scared of falling and not scared of hurting themselves. They tend to be very, very good
Progress
learners
fast.
of the tunnel. They progress fast because they don't care. They're not scared of the net or the walls, and they've got a pretty good sense of, you know, like they've got.
But similar with people who's doing a different kind of martial arts.
Yeah, but different, because I feel like skateboarders are some, if not the most hardcore punks.
For sure.
You know, they just send it, and then if on top of that you've got some water awareness, then you've got.
But there's difference between like not caring about getting hurt or learning to fall.
Yeah, they're cats.
But like say for example with jiu-jitsu, you have to learn to fall before you can start trying to sort someone out.
You know, the problem with jiu-jitsu is simply that, like, I find it now, I've been training for quite a long time.
Judo and these other sports.
But it's kind of the same there. It's going across martial arts that, in a way, martial arts, while it is extremely technical in every aspect, it still benefits you immensely to be strong, to have strength, explosive strength, all types of different power. And in flying, being like
it's a balance exercise or whatever you would call what we do.
Exactly, yeah. I found that people that train jiu-jitsu are not fluid enough. Most of them, I can't generalize, but generally speaking, the longer you train, and like if you look at the belt system, the higher and the colored belts, the higher belts, they all tend up getting quite bigger as the belts progress, so they get more muscular. And I can see it on myself too. Like, the better I want to get at jiu-jitsu, the more I tend to actually do strength training. Yeah. And
that's just injury prevention, huh?
It is, but it is also a matter of I come here to Voss and I'm fighting these 100-kilo Vikings, and then if they got some skill and they got some belts, then I fight 100-kilo Vikings that know how to fight, and then all of a sudden, if you don't have at least some weight and power, like, you just don't really stand a chance. And so at least that's from my experience, and so I think that kind of goes hand in hand with martial arts. In all martial arts, you end up doing a lot of strength training. Maybe not in Muay Thai, they tend to be pretty skinny, but the point being more, yes, it's injury prevention, and I think that martial arts don't benefit flying as much as, for example, skateboarding or swimming, from my experience. Yeah.
It's hard to say in flying.
Yeah, I never really figured out what is like the perfect setup to become good at flying.
I would say, I mean, one of the hardest things to transfer in teaching flying is the feeling aspect of it. Yeah. Because balance is just a concept we can talk about, but it's very hard to
conceptualize it in words.
Yeah, like how do I now know that you feel what I feel when you're doing what it looks like I'm doing?
Yeah, and the crazy thing is, obviously for us, we've felt all of the things that you can feel there in the tunnel or in the sky. So for us, it's really easy to visualize what the person in front is actually feeling and observing right now in that moment. So we can visualize that, but they can't. So it's like you can show them one thing, and then you know how they oftentimes people will think they're actually doing what you're showing them, but they're not. Yeah. So I feel like
most of the time, I would say.
Yeah, most of the time, exactly. So it's actually really interesting because, of course, through flying, we've become so meticulous in our ability to visualize sensations and feelings that I found now, for me, I have developed such an incredible skill of adapting or copying what people do in other sports. It's really easy for me to pick up their skill because I can visualize what they feel. So I feel like that came through flying, obviously. Yeah. It's very cool. But in the other way around, it might be not so easy, right?
Yeah, I mean, that particular aspect is definitely not, because you can break stuff down mechanically. Yeah. But again, without the balance and the feeling, it's just the movement or coordination or whatever that would be. The locomotion of a certain thing can be correct without having the right outcome just because the wind is actually blowing. Exactly. And that changes I mean, I would say there's no real similarities in other things that we can do that have the ability to change the wind speed or like the sensation of power from any direction or orientation, being in any orientation, and the wind coming from the direction that you want it to come from, balancing. Like nowadays people think that the side flying is cool. I would say that to those that don't know this, Dale Stewart, which most people probably don't know who is, she was side flying 30-40 years ago.
Yeah, even I mean now that in the tunnel, for example, we have the Mana Space Lab as one of the compulsory moves. I remember seeing like already when I started flying, Marco Mana was doing it on the side. He was doing the sideways walker, no?
Yeah, I mean it's just like everything else is kind of like rolling in a loop because people are not inventive enough to come up with new stuff.
Exactly.
But that's one of the aspects of our sport, which I think is the most interesting, I guess, that it's so unique the way we have contact with the wind.
Yeah.
And the ability to change direction. Say you can ride on a motorbike and experience the same wind resistance, but you can't just go sideways or upside down or backwards or these kind of things and maintain control and speed.
Yes.
So that's quite unique for what we do, which makes it obviously difficult for people coming from other sports to just adapt, even though they might be the best in their field.
Yeah.
It still takes a long time to kind of put those type of skills into play in what we do.
And surprisingly enough, I have found that skills that most people assume will transfer very well into the wind tunnel. So for example, gymnasts or gymnastic skills, they don't transfer into flying very well because a gymnast is very rigid in the way they execute movements, right? Yeah. Especially gymnastics that has become somewhat military in the execution of things. So very focused on form. And this way of going through movements doesn't help in flying. Like rigidity isn't always of service.
I think the obviously if you're good at a sport, you can transfer the the way you're thinking about it. And I think the most impressive, best or whatever adjective you would put to this example that I've seen is Philip being a semi-professional basketball player and then becoming a tunnel flyer.
Yeah, but Philip is not from this planet. We can't even use him as an example. Well,
to me, he was. I mean, I was lucky enough, if I can say like that we were in Botrop in the beginning at the same time, and to me it was pretty obvious that he was gonna become my teammate if there was a reason to have a teammate.
Yeah.
He told me that he had a teammate or like teammates already. But I don't know, somehow we managed to figure out that was probably the best way to do it like this if we're going to go compete. But I don't know, like he's the what do you call it in the point in basketball that basically guides the game. So you have to have the playmaker, like a certain way of thinking to see the lines happen. If there's certain systems that is pre-trained and you can set them up, and now this and that is gonna happen. So like it's a mindset more than a skill, I think.
Of course it is.
Skill.
I think just to clarify, because I hope that enough people listen to this podcast that are maybe also newer to the sport, it's important to mention we're talking about Filip Srnjakovic, who is, at least for me, has probably been the most influential part of my flying, and is, at least for me, without any doubt, the best flyer, like the greatest of all time when it comes to flying as a whole, especially with wind tunnel. So he is the dude that already 12 years ago I was watching videos of him, and he flies better in those videos 12 years ago than most people I can think of fly right now. So he has a very, very special mind. It's very well read, just knows a lot. So it's that's why I'm saying he's not from this planet. He also, if you see him, you wouldn't assume or just generalize that he fits this usual concept of what a tunnel flyer looks like. And so he defies most laws that
that's why aerodynamics come in. No, it's
exactly, yeah.
I don't think that him. I mean, I guess he's proved that times enough that being a atypical frame is not the difference.
Dude, I've seen him outfloat like 45 kilo little girl. He outfloats me by a bunch. Like, I remember he was teaching me a few years ago some stuff that became a really big foundation of my how I generate lift on the belly for head up flying and maybe front layouts and from out face and so on. So like he taught me a lot how to find lift on my thighs and so on, right? And I remember learning that from him, and he just out floated me, like he just disappeared upwards, and I just couldn't go off the net. And I was just like, man, you weigh 10 kilos more than me and you're like a head shorter. What's going on? It doesn't make sense. It's just a matter of unlocking that right sensation in the right moment and letting the air pick you up, right?
Yeah.
But he's the daddy of that.
Yeah, I mean, there is probably no other people who is doing the type of low speed coaching that he does, especially now, that maybe they do similar kind of things, but not with the ability to actually show how it's done on the speed that he wants the student to fly.
100%, absolutely. I mean, for me, I heard him say something quite beautiful about what he actually does in the tunnel, because I think that also for most people in this category that I want to put myself, that I want to put you, that I put Ramsey and Philip, I think most people really misunderstood what it is we're trying to achieve with the students. And so using Philip as an example, a lot of people talk about this low speed thing and like doing exercise on the net and crawling around. They call it tunnel yoga. It's like, nah, he just tries to make you feel human in there. He's like, we know this. You take a person in the tunnel, they're so out of space and not aware of what's going on around them. You need to first make them aware of where the right arm is. Like, of course, it's a different story entirely. If outside the tunnel they can't differentiate their left from the right arm, then it's going to be really difficult inside the tunnel. But anyways, you need to try to at least bring them back into whatever they are not inside the tunnel, right? You have to figure out how to make them feel normal. So I think that a lot of what he does, at least on the beginning with people, is that. And of course, through experience, he learned to not even bother trying to go anywhere else. Like if the dude is missing his basic fundamental body awareness in there, then what are you going to try to do anything other than
the downside with what we do is that it's quite a expensive thing to become good at. So most of the people that have the cash flow to become good, they usually didn't do the same things that say you or I or Philip did or whatever. Don't have necessarily the same sports background to actually know what left and right is when you're upside down. That can be quite a challenge for most people when they're learning to fly, just to know, are we going left now, and which arm is this?
No, 100%. Of course, that's a big thing, but I think super important at this point is also to speak about what this low speed thing that everybody is kind of maybe talking poorly about is actually about, because I think a lot of people have taken it into the dirt. And I get a lot of people asking me, writing me messages, hey, I want to get coaching from you, but I heard you doing this low speed stuff, and it's like, yeah, but ironically, our students, when I look at my students, your students, Philip's students, Ramsey's students, they're the elite flyers of the world. They're high level competitors. They are people that fly at topped out wind speeds all the time. Like our students don't fly at low wind speeds, just we teach them certain things that they need to learn at certain speeds where it makes sense to learn certain sensations. But isn't it ironic that they're all zooming around at high speeds and so are we. So it's not like we're trying to make you turn in a circle on the net, that's not the intention or point.
I mean, we probably all have our different specific reason for it, but like for me, like I said earlier, I want people to fly as fast as they can.
Absolutely.
And the easiest way to do that is to go low speed.
Yeah, because people will
never actually... the consequence is very small.
Exactly.
And also, even though you still fly slow, you fly as fast as you can on that speed.
Yeah.
But which gives you more time to feel and maneuver and everything, right?
Yes.
And once you can harness this, the wind speed doesn't really matter anymore, because then it's just down to reaction time. So in that sense, it's just a way of getting to the right point the fastest.
Sure.
I have students that kind of like did the old school way, or I mean, I sometimes think of it like the iFly way or the IBA way of just getting people as fast as possible to be able to balance on the head. And those that do that typically has to do quite a long detour to get back to what is now called dynamic flying and being able to actually move.
You can hardly expect somebody at very high wind speed to actually let go, because it's ridiculous how fast it starts to move, and if you're not used to it and you speak in reaction time and so on, you just can't figure it out.
If you don't have the balance to go into a fast flying position,
yeah, exactly,
then you know you're gonna hurt yourself in less than a second if you make a mistake.
Yeah, and I think also the low speed has, if low speed is being used with the right intention, so if I'm trying to teach somebody how to, let's say, carve, and that means to actually take an angle regardless of how flat or steep they are, but there is the intention of what an angle feels like and how to take the angle and where you hold yourself and where you push and all these things, that transfers really easily into more or less wind speed. The problem is that nowadays all these amateur coaches, they just do garbage with that low speed. They just put people on the low speed because it's a cool thing to do, and they see, let's say you do it, and then just turn in a circle, and then you've got a student that's got 15 hours of carving on his back, and the moment you increase the speed by 0.5%, he just ejects upwards. It's like, yeah, because the entire point of delivering the knowledge of carving wasn't there. It was just we just turn on the back on the low wind speed. So
you find the right speed that they don't pop.
Yeah, exactly, right. So that's unfortunately, because there are too many amateurs that copy without knowing what they're copying. They are taking certain things and making them look bad, and that can also be said about words to be used. So I for example started now sharing a lot of my knowledge, or at least conceptualizing things for students of mine on my like online platform and so on, in this members club that I have where we meet once a week. And I am a bit scared, and I'm trying to do my best and being really careful how I word things and that I explain them the right way, but still I'm scared that people will use my words but then deliver a different message, and that's going to happen obviously. That's just unfortunately how it's going to be. But the same thing happens with coaching and flying, and like, you know, our videos, like even this podcast, I'm sure that some of the things people will repeat, they will reword them or repeat them in the exact same words, but the different intention will come across.
Yeah, I don't think you can really like just listen to a conversation and then pick out and then be able to directly transfer the meaning of it.
Of course not.
That's quite hard. But we all have that's the thing, we all have our own way into where we are now. So my experience is going to make me explain certain things in my way, which is not necessarily the way, but you would have your way, and then what you want to achieve is probably what I want to achieve, but explained in certain other ways.
Yeah.
So if you have someone who doesn't have like the same level of understanding of where the end goal is, whatever they're saying is may be meaningless.
Exactly.
And obviously this you see a lot, but this is gonna happen in any field where it goes from kind of grassroots to becoming a thing where now there's probably quite a few people who has it as a side profession, and obviously less, but still quite a big group of people who has it as their main intact,
Sure.
or like the only thing they do.
Yeah. Well, but it's also really a good, like, it's really cool, man. Imagine you just come into this world and all of a sudden you can ask for $200 an hour for just standing in there, because I mean, especially, okay, I don't want to like butcher anything here, but like I've seen it a lot in America in the IBA system, where you enter and you get this beautiful red tunnel instructor suit, and all of a sudden you've got a figure of competence, which is just not how it works. It's not like you don't just become all of a sudden magically good at flying or coaching, and but let's not go down that rabbit hole.
I would definitely say too that a good coach, of the people that I've seen that I can consider like up in a range where you can say like this person at least has a plan.
Yes.
They also instructors.
100%.
Because you need the ground level of safety understanding, and if you ask someone to do something, you will have to know more or less if that's possible for the person, and also how to intervene if it's necessary.
Yeah. Well, for me, I was obviously ridiculously lucky that I had Ramsey, who kind of took me under his wing very early on. Like, I was lucky that he happened to be basically one of my first tunnel coaches, but really my first tunnel coach that actually I stuck with for a while, and he gave me all my basics, and then he also ended up just making sure I don't go down some bad path, and just started coaching me on coaching, and not clue why he did what he did, but the last, I don't know, 8 years or so, he's just been giving me shit on a daily basis on how to be a better human and better coach and better flyer. So I mean, not everybody has that, and obviously I most of what I do is thanks to that.
Yeah.
And the same thing, one of the most fundamentally, I think, important things he gave me for my coaching was like, yeah, but do you even have an intention when you go in the tunnel with your students? Before the camp starts, you have 5 hours with a person. Do you set, like, you know who's coming? Do you know what your plan is, your intention, your goal? And then each session you go in, do you have like a not necessarily even a plan, but as you say, do you have a goal? Where do you want to end up?
Yeah.
What do you want to achieve with that person? What is your hope that that person ends up coming out with? And most people don't have that. Exactly as you say, they just go in there, and then whether it's on a skydive or whether it's in the tunnel, they just kind of, yeah, awesome. You know, they just...
I mean, when we started, I often saw people have the whiteboard with like, then we're gonna do this in those 2.5 minutes, and and then for me that was like, no, but this is gonna be a waste of time. What if the person is not achieving what you want them to achieve in this couple of minutes?
Hey, but this is still better than having no plan at all.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure, but the plan, at least the way I approach it, is not so set that we like, in this half an hour we're gonna do those two things, or only this, or we're gonna achieve this.
Yeah.
But I would say at this point, most of the people I fly with fly for like a bunch of camps.
Exactly.
So then I know what we did last time, and they already know what I want to work with them on the next one, and based on this it becomes a lot easier for both parts to have like an understanding of where we're heading.
Yeah, absolutely. Now I think that I have a question, or maybe this is just a general interest, and it kind of obviously goes hand in hand with everything that you've explained about your concept of flying with people and so on. But in the recent years, you've started putting a lot of effort on the actual, like, two people flying together in the tunnel. So a lot of your coaching now is based on building maybe kind of routines, if that's the right word to use, but you're kind of building a form of interaction between two flyers, building these opposing lines and so on. Can you explain that a bit? What is your intention with that? How does that work for different levels of flyers? And how does, let's start with that.
I would say maybe when I really started going more and more into that, I got to a point where I found that doing layouts together with people, next to people, were more beneficial for especially them, but also my spotting got easier when I'm flying next to them.
Yeah. And now you're talking like side by side, actually.
Side by side, yeah. Because they can then real time see what I'm doing.
Exactly.
And then just do the same thing, and we're just gonna repeat, like we can do maybe 5 minutes straight of only back layouts or front layouts, or any kind of exercise really.
Yeah.
Can be only the bottom part of a layout that we just do next to each other. And then, as Philip and I have been competing quite a bit together, building free routines, which is a different type of way of flying together than a freestyle team would be.
Sure.
Where you kind of, or at least the way we would do stuff, we do the same, but either opposite or opposing, or ways where I would be able to fly exactly the same line as Philip, just on the other side of the tunnel.
Yeah.
And then through this, then I feel that it becomes easier for the student genuinely to just do the same as me, both in the sense of level, distance to the center, speed around in the tunnel, copy body positions and general. So when you go all the way into the technique that I'm trying to get across, then they can just see what I'm doing on the video and what they are doing.
Yeah.
And then through this, what they can change.
Yeah.
So in a way, I start doing this very early with people.
Yeah.
I mean, it's I would say carving together is the base of it.
Yes.
So most people that are teaching carving, they're carving with the student.
Yeah.
And obviously, if you fly with a little kid, then you lose this ability. But that would be layouts next to each other, and then the carving. That is kind of the ground level of this.
Yeah.
But then obviously I also have the other side to that I want people to be interested in the competition aspect of it, and then get them some understanding of how you actually approach flying together with someone
Yes.
that is safe and easy.
So that's basically conceptualizing a routine, for example. Like how do you,
Yeah,
what's
how
the
would you go
fundamental,
about
how do you build
setting
it?
it up? Yeah.
Yeah. What are the base concepts?
And then for me, I would say like the base level of my teaching, and especially in the tunnel, is that it's belly flying or back flying.
Mm-hmm.
I use head up and head down only as describing the orientation that we're in.
Yeah, whether your head
relative
is
to the
above or below the
surroundings.
hip.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So everything is going somewhere, and then I would say that's probably based on what the freestyle is, that we don't stop.
Yeah.
So then you're in a constant movement, and then if the line is predictable enough, then the student don't need to have this aspect of like preparedness or balance that is required to follow, where you can have a surprise element. But when we do the line simultaneously, there's basically, this is what we do.
But is it always gonna have to be briefed, or can it be spontaneous?
No, it's for sure spontaneous, but it's almost like saying that now we're gonna play with colors.
Yeah.
And then we have these 5 colors.
Exactly.
Right? So whatever it can be. If I say, when I'm teaching carving, in-face carving head down, if I fly up into the tunnel, I'm about to do a back layout.
Yeah.
If I fly down into the tunnel, I'm about to do a front layout.
Mm-hmm.
If I fly up into the tunnel, the next step can only then be a back layout, switch direction,
Which
go
is
to
the
out
same
face,
setup, though.
which is then exactly the same. So you
Yeah.
don't really need to know what's coming till
Exactly.
it's there.
Till you end up there anyways, and then
Yeah.
you've already seen it.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
then it's just slowly adding, and then maybe this is good enough, but now we change the line, so now you have to go over here instead. And
Yeah.
then it can be a couple of tries where it's a little bit of confusing, but then
Yeah.
we move on, and then it's all good again.
Perfect.
And then I would say like the general base of the flying we do in the tunnel is carving and layouts.
Sure. That's kind of what we do.
Yeah. So if you switch in between the two,
Yeah.
then it becomes good. So like this, I spend a lot of time with the layouts in general.
Yeah.
Because I think that's where the base is. Like, if you can fly down and up controlled in both directions, then you can probably do that going sideways too.
Yeah.
Carving is essentially just side sliding.
Yeah.
So then I mix. So instead of just necessarily doing layouts, then we do layouts and carving.
Exactly.
And then it's the front layout and the back layout.
Yeah.
So in a way, then that is the whole thing. So I only really start going into the depth of carving when we can do good layouts.
You
Because
could
then you can
theoretically do the
control.
other way around too. Now you could argue that if you know how to carve, then you're probably gonna know how to do a layout, or at
Yeah.
least you understood how to do the change of balance and
Yeah.
where to hold yourself and stuff.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
It's not like I neglect the carving until they can do perfect layouts, but it's more the idea that in a layout you have to go through all the angles,
Yeah.
which some of them wouldn't be necessary in carving, but most
Perfect.
of them you use in carving.
Yeah. That
And
makes
if you
sense.
can control those, then if you can do really good layouts, especially front layouts, once you start with outface carving, you already know all the angles and the power that you play with,
and probably where
the
your head
controls
goes.
and-
Well, although outface is this weird thing where you just have to be in outface also to figure it out, right? Like you
yeah,
can't.
for sure.
Same thing goes to in-face carving. They are at some point their own feelings that you just have to be in to understand, right?
Yeah.
There's this weird thing
Like
about it.
now this week I was flying with Francis, who has been flying quite a bit with both Philip and Mesa,
Mhm.
and he said that he's not tried outface carving before,
Mhm.
other than the American style, like go to head down and then try and not smash the wall while you enter it.
Yeah.
And he basically flew outface in the first 5 minutes.
Yeah.
He did a lot of training with them, and now we
Yeah.
did a full camp with me with what I wanted to try and do with the skills he had. And I mean, so like he flies the layouts pretty good.
Yeah.
Obviously, I would still change some stuff, but based on this, that in a way also proves a little bit how I'm thinking about it. Like, if you can fly layouts like he can, then the carving side of it is a lot easier.
Of course.
Because you already have the controls.
Where do you stand with that? For example, in my case, over the years, while I still have a pretty heavy focus on people doing it the way I believe where the concept ends up being correct, the actual execution being perfect, I don't care anymore so much. Like, I think it's a bit the same for you now that I see, for example, people of different levels just going for the lines and following you and so on. I guess you put a lot more effort on the actual flying part rather than the perfect hand position or whatever, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
The faster you fly, the more alike you're gonna look.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's
Sure.
just how aerodynamics work. But I would say I try to do this thing in my teaching where I fully belly fly the whole body or fully back fly the whole body.
Yeah.
And that goes into carving too. So when I'm carving in face head down, I use the dorsal side of the hand and
because you mean the palms up, like the dorsal side of your hand is basically the extension of your back, is what you mean? Yeah.
So like if you would be belly flying, you wouldn't use that side of the hand.
Yeah.
You would naturally use the palm.
Sure.
And then the same with the feet and the knees and the elbows, and
sure,
obviously it goes to the belly and the back. But so I teach some different stuff there, which is not necessarily necessary, but when I explain technique, it makes more sense to me, at least, right? And I'm sure other people have negative things to say about those aspects of it, but it doesn't really affect me.
Sure.
So I definitely, I would say through all of the skydiving tracking organizing I did, which for sure when I started that, tracking was something else.
Yeah.
I worked a lot in the positions, just being the base or whatever, setting the direction.
Sure. Yeah.
And this kind of led to me trying a lot of this stuff in the tunnel and figuring out like, it was a different transition to the traditional in-face head-down carving position with the arms, to manipulate your arms around and then going back to the idea that you just back flying.
Sure.
How do you go fast forward and then transition to fast backwards? Easiest or the easiest, and then it comes together with how the body is built,
of course,
and maintaining pressure on the arms.
Sure.
And then in my head there's just one way to do that.
Sure.
Or you have to twist around.
Yeah, I think that in the end, the method, as you kind of say that everybody has their own method, what matters is that the concept of it being a carve and how you really gonna accelerate and how you take the angle and so on, it ends up being the same. And then where you find lift, palms down, palms up, is a matter also of kind of preference and I guess what you're used to and where you hopefully feel the most efficiency maybe. And then that is also probably coming down to just what you've done a lot.
You don't see the difference in efficiency in the tunnel, I think, but if you go to the sky, you will.
Yeah. See, I've played around with it a bunch too. That's why I'm saying it. Like for me, it just feels better to feel, even when I'm back flying, to use my palms. And that's, I think...
but that's the thing. It's not a matter of position. It's when you need to move.
Okay, yeah.
When you need to move out of position.
Sure.
Right, so if you... That's why I used the example when you say like you go fast forward and now you have to quickly go fast backwards.
Then you don't have to do a transition of your actual body position.
Which position would your arms be in when you're head up, back, let's call it backtracking, whatever.
Yeah.
Would you put the palms on the wind or the dorsal side?
Yeah, of course.
Right, so to me this is just back flying. So if you do that when you're head up, what's the reason to not do that when you're head down?
For sure.
And how would you transition your arms in between the two?
But I could argue the same that
and then it only really becomes a thing when you're on the limit, right? So when you have plenty of range, it doesn't matter at all because you don't really need your arms at that point.
Of course.
But if you're on the limit, then the transition is gonna matter. But this is just one of the little things that I focus on in my way of doing it.
Yeah.
But it doesn't have anything to do with like if you want to go faster and you look like a banana, it has nothing to do with the hands.
Absolutely.
Or the arms or anything.
Absolutely.
Then you need to stretch out, right?
Yeah.
And I don't care how you do that. Then we can say like, what does straight mean?
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Well, you can draw a line and then we can talk about it being straight or not.
Yeah.
So in that sense, I agree with you. Like all of those other things doesn't matter at all. If you don't know if you're flying half a meter too far, you're gonna hit the wall. It doesn't matter if you have perfect technique doing that.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of those kind of things that doesn't matter at all. But that's where in my world it becomes a visual thing, and that's back to the camouflaging kind of thing. That if I wanna do high score in a free routine, doing freestyle, being a camoflyer, I need to know what I'm looking at all the time.
Sure.
Not here and there, but all the time.
Yeah.
So I'm constantly gonna look and then make changes to whatever's happening based on what I see.
Yeah.
And that can be flappy arms or not.
Sure.
But at that point, it's just is the camera pointing in the right direction? Do I have the right distance? Am I going in the right direction?
And then that's the priority.
Yeah. So whatever position I have doesn't matter at all.
Yeah.
One of the good quotes from Jonathan Livingston Seagull is that the perfect speed is being there.
Yeah.
So whatever that means is you can have all the positions you want,
exactly.
but if your job is to be there,
yeah,
then that's what makes
and you
difference.
you can see that a lot on the, let's say, old school flyers, and it doesn't really matter who, but you can see some old school flyers that are really on top of their thing and they just look like shit and they're shaking, but they are doing what they have to do, and that's so much more valuable than body positions or what method you use when you do X or Y or Z. But I still have one question. So like what you showed now, for example, with the palm, the dorsal side of your hands facing, when you back fly, let's say you're in head up and then they are here. What if you just want to go to static head up now? Then you would probably end up holding yourself there, right?
Yeah, but then in my way of especially the teaching, like what I prefer to teach, there is no static head up.
Okay, so then you never have that. Yeah,
no.
Perfect.
But if I would go vertical in a head up position, it would be because we're gonna go fast. So then my hands would be the same, but just like without.
Gotcha.
I'm not gonna go
without any lift basically on them.
But that's the thing for me with like I try to explain flying a little bit in the direction of like plane flying and helicopter flying.
Mm-hmm.
Right, the plane needs forward motion, and the other one needs the fan to hold them away from the ground. But if you take the fan, it's not a flying thing anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
So like I would say that VFS and those kind of things go into the helicopter area, and freestyle and flying and whatever dynamic is more like in the plane area.
Yeah, understood. That makes a lot of sense. Now with that, you explained to me really beautifully a part of, like, you have a lot of knowledge on fluid mechanics actually. So we spoke about well, okay, you have a lot more than me anyways. So
it's quite a detailed subject.
Yeah, of course it is. But so my question, I guess, for the audience is something that we get asked a lot is between the students. There is this new culture of very tight suits over the last years. So when we differentiate between, let's say, the learning process of wearing a baggy suit or a tight suit, and then the performance part of that, and then maybe most importantly the actual interesting scientific part behind it, like the fluid mechanic part of it, can you explain one more time your understanding of how the air moves around the body, and then maybe how the baggy suit affects that, the burbles that get created behind the body, and just shoot.
Yeah, I remember back when we as the freestylers or free flyers in skydiving were talking about one day our suits will be tighter than yours, when we were talking to the belly flyers, and they were like but obviously now we're there, but back then it was the freestylers, they had way tighter suits than the belly flyers. So in a way there's nothing new about it, but of course we don't really we don't really fly as people think, like what is flying. That's not what we do in skydiving or in the tunnel flying. We fall way more than this. But if you go into fluid mechanics, then lift is gonna occur if you have the right shape pointed towards the direction.
Mm-hmm. Like an airplane wing, an airfoil.
Yeah. So yeah, exactly. So if you shape it the right way, with the movement, say if in the tunnel, obviously it's the air that's moving, and in the sky, it's us that's moving. And then with the force of the direction, you can manipulate how the air is traveling around you.
Mm-hmm.
And there's lift and drag that can influence the how you move around, or how we fall, or whatever that's then called. But in a baggy suit, you can't overrule the shape as well, because you can't
manipulate
you
suit.
can't really create a boundary layer.
Mm-hmm.
Because the suit is moving, so it's never really going to be a clean boundary layer, where on a tight suit you can do that.
I think you have to explain for audience what boundary layer exactly means. It's when the air is attaching to the object, right?
Yes, so like the low pressure that you have on top of an airfoil is basically the low pressure is making the air follow the shape of say the wing or your body, or whatever it is, to the point where the contact between the body and the air, the molecules that are there, is, depending on the situation, is near static. So that's the boundary layer. So the speed of the air that's actually on you is almost not moving, or it's much slower than the speed that's away from you.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what the boundary layer is. It's how the low pressure arrives, which is then pulling the wing. That's the boundary layer. And the boundary layer only really happens based on the Coanda effect, which is how do I explain the Coanda effect? I would say that people should check these terms online, but the Coanda effect is something that happens around a curved surface. So if you visualize the leading edge of a wing, and the air is moving towards the leading edge, it's not just going to spill off.
Yeah.
It's going to follow the curve.
Yeah.
This is based on the Coanda effect.
Perfect.
And then based on this, then you will then generate the boundary layer. Perfect. And then depending on the shape of the airfoil, you can then have the boundary layer travel all the way back, or just partially.
Mm-hmm.
This is a little bit to do with your angle of attack and also the shape of the airfoil.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're like nowadays with the big wingsuits, they can actually go up.
Mm-hmm.
That's just because it's the ratio, I guess, between the shape of the wing and the weight that they're carrying and the speed that they can generate,
mm-hmm.
actually allow them to lift,
mm-hmm.
like have vertical lift.
Yeah.
Which we obviously cannot in a normal free fall situation.
Yeah,
but that is basically because of the low pressure is big enough that it generates the amount of lift that required to go up.
And it isn't just a matter of redirecting the energy. There is actually obviously an entire beautiful array of fluid mechanical things happening there, right? It's not just okay, wingsuit goes here and then you just redirect it. There's actually lift, there's actually boundary layers, there's actually everything going on there, right?
I mean the physics of the fluid mechanics doesn't really care if you're falling or if you whatever you call what you're doing. That's gonna do that. That's in a way also why I use it in my teaching, because that's physics. It's not religion. Like I could tell you this is the best way to do it, and then my student is gonna say why, and then it's because that's what I figured out. But I try to go to the physics side of it and say like I mean there's many smart people that have been working on this for years now. Like one of the most complicated areas that I've been looking into when it comes to fluid dynamics is the Reynolds numbers that is almost impossible to explain. But that's basically viscosity and velocity. or like the speed that you can carry,
Mm-hmm.
and how much drag that it will create based on the viscosity. So if you say like air is air, but in the wind tunnel, the viscosity of the air is quite high.
Sure.
And if you just go on your bike, it's not that high.
Mm-hmm.
But there's still resistance from the wind, and it will create a type of angle behind you that's turbulent, which is your drag. And then you can manipulate this by either changing the angle of attack or the position or these kind of things that allow you to then change the speed.
And this burble is obviously, or like this turbulence behind you is obviously significantly more if you have a baggy suit, for example, and significantly less.
Not necessarily actually, but it's more the ability to change the airfoil that becomes harder.
Perfect.
The air that goes around you, I would say the drag as such. If you see a chimney, for example,
Mm-hmm.
they often have something going around them,
Yeah.
and this is partially to stop the oscillation that could happen on high winds
Mm-hmm.
because of the vortex street, but also the sound that it creates. It breaks up the sound.
Okay.
So for those that know a little bit more details about the tunnel industry, the cables that iFly is using is patented with the last cable going around the other ones, and that's why they can have this shitty door system that allow the tunnel to be running while the doors are open.
It's
and
because
not,
of the net.
yeah, so
Okay.
like they kill a lot of the sound there.
Uh-huh.
No, it's not because of the net that they can do that, but the sound is a lot less because of this.
Gotcha. Okay.
But in the sense of like the difference between a baggy suit and a tight suit is like a baggy suit is and not an airfoil.
Yeah.
So if you want to fly, that doesn't really work so well. You
It does work in terms of being a helicopter and just trying to not fall down. So static flying, where the more baggy, the
but
less
then
you fall.
that's where I go like that's not
Exactly.
exactly flying.
Yeah.
I would say flying only really occurs when you generate some level of lift.
Yeah.
And that's really hard if you have a baggy suit, because even though you can present a leading edge, it won't allow the boundary layer.
Yeah. So I guess we can differentiate between drag and lift finally using the correct terms here. So you can actually create lift while flying, or you can create drag while flying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's not like one is better than the other always. There's certain situations where drag is better to use for whatever you're trying to achieve, and vice versa. But I would say that that's clearly like a real benefit for the flying. But if I go skydiving, I use jeans and just like whatever top.
Yeah.
For this, I don't care too much. But I'm not trying to perform at a certain level in skydiving. I'm just jumping out and flying together with people, right?
Sure.
But for sure, in the tunnel where we spend a lot more time, it makes an immense difference to the tiredness, like the sensation in the body. Like you probably do the same as me, like 3, 4, 5 hours of spending time in the tunnel a day. And the transition when we went away from the baggy suits to the tight suits were like most of the injuries went away.
Yeah, that's true.
And that's just the suit pulling the body around the whole time.
It's actually also the suit, obviously, because we stand in the tunnel quite a bit. The baggy suit generates an immense amount of turbulences that end up hitting your head. So the vibration that you feel on your head and the actual, like, the shaking and the noise goes down immensely too. And then I, for example, had for a while this golf ball helmet from Sky Helmets. While standing on the net, it didn't make that big of a difference, but then when I was flying, it was insane. Like if I was just back flying, the helmet was exposed to the air without anything below it. I could really feel how the air wraps around it, just like what you described. So like way more efficiently, it was 40% more quiet, I would say. It was insane.
Yeah, but the turbulence translates to sound as well as movement.
Yeah.
So if you can reduce the turbulence,
you reduce the
drag.
Sound.
Yeah. That's maybe more detailed than necessary to talk about, but the vortex street is an interesting thing to kind of study a little bit because it oscillates. And a lot of people have, like, say for example, I spent quite a bit of time in a stretched out back flying position with my students, because this is used for basically everything.
What do you mean by that? Stretched out back flying position.
Like just falling straight down or laying on the net, stretching out and trying to touch the net with just the heels and the back of the helmet.
Perfect. Yeah.
So a little bit, I use the term banana position, but obviously it's just like a stretched.
You could
out.
change it to the erectile. You can Never mind.
But the idea with that is in a way that you now have created an area of quite a lot of turbulence.
Yeah.
Or the vortex street is going to be quite big, and the trick there with the tight suit is that you can manipulate how the airflow goes around you.
Yeah.
The vortex oscillates no matter the object in water or air.
Yeah.
And that oscillation has some effect on your body. So even though that the suit is tight, we're still soft.
Yeah.
So it can make the body move.
Yeah.
Like the shape of you. Perfect. But it can definitely make you move. Mm-hmm. Right? And then with good enough balance, then you can calm this down almost to not being there. Perfect. Which is then how you would manipulate your fall rate.
Yeah.
And then you can say start with low speed and then go higher and higher speed without necessarily popping up on a speed where for people that cannot do it, it seems like impossible.
Because that's one of the very interesting things that, if I would have to put it in words, is the ability to make yourself heavy. Something that in flying is, as you just described quite nicely, but that's, to put it in really easy words, like we have that ability to basically be in the exact same position and just get heavier or lighter. And I guess you've explained that to me before. It's a matter of balance, right?
It's balance for sure. Like without the balance you cannot, but it's how you manipulate the airflow around your body. So that's the thing with I use the term the Reynolds numbers, but if you create more turbulence behind you, you go upwards in the tunnel relative to the glass, right? Or the net. And if you reduce this, then you can come down.
Yeah.
So that's done obviously through having a certain amount of balance, but also the ability to manipulate the airflow behind you or above you.
Yeah.
So when you think that, it's a common way of explaining it, I guess, like being heavy. Mm-hmm. But obviously, that's a little bit just like a word salad. But
it's a word salad, but yet that's exactly what it is, right?
If you can manipulate the airflow above you to the point where you reduce the drag, you will fall faster.
Yeah.
So even if you don't know that's what you're doing, that's what's happening.
It is just the problem that if you would explain that to somebody who's never felt getting heavier in scientific terms, it would not make them understand how to get heavier. Like it's still based on that feeling, like we spoke earlier, that like how do you deliver that feeling?
Yeah, but that's I do that. I guess Philip is a very good example of that now, by flying on low enough speed and then doing stuff that is super hard.
Yeah.
But on speed, that's possible.
Yeah.
And then you can basically feel really quickly into whatever exercise it is, if you're in balance or not.
Yep.
If you're not in balance, then you maximize the drag. And then you lose either balance or you lift away from the net. Exactly.
Well, he does that quite beautifully with certain exercises. If people don't understand how to get lift, he puts them in places where he's like, okay, but so lay on the net and then go into whatever this position that is supposedly floaty and be heavy, and people can't. They just lift off. Yeah. And then they're like, well, so when you're trying to be heavy, you can't. And when you're trying to go up, you can't. So... Right, so you can kind of, or I've seen him. I hope I'm saying that in the right way, but I believe that some exercises I've seen him do are with that intention, that he just basically glues people to the net to make them lift off unintentionally, so that it clicks for them what it actually feels like to generate lift.
Yeah, well, I use that a lot with the people I teach. That I would say I generally use more wind speed than for sure Philip and probably others too, but. If we take a position like we're talking about now, and you cannot go down, then should be fairly easy to go up.
Yeah, exactly. But that's the point. But somehow
so
it's not.
I want you to take this position that you think you cannot stay down in when you do a layout.
Yeah, exactly.
Because then you're gonna go up.
And if you go up, then it's really easy to change your balance to do a layout.
So if you can stay static in this position or
Yeah.
move backwards and forwards, sideways, turn around in it, which would be carving, then you should be able to do layouts in this position.
Absolutely.
Not that you shouldn't take all the other positions too, but it just as a concept of like, I want you to have this position now and go down. And then they say that, but this is not possible.
Yeah.
But me, I'm staying down there.
Exactly.
So obviously it's possible.
Exactly.
But if you cannot go up, now go up. If you cannot go down, now it's time to go up.
Exactly.
And then they start realizing that up is actually quite easy, instead of a lot of people are pushing on the wind
Exactly.
to generate lift. But that's not how that works. Because then if you push on the wind in a sense of a static direction or like a vertical direction, then you generate drag, right?
Absolutely.
And that's why you go up relative to the net.
Well, or if you push in the wrong way, you just end up falling down because you break whatever feeling or sensation of holding you have, whatever drag you have, or whatever lift you have, right?
Yeah.
It's like first timers do, no?
But that's the thing with the wind speed that we fly with in a tunnel, even when we call it low speed, it's still fast enough that if you would ride this speed on your motorbike,
Yeah.
it would feel quite fast.
It would feel very uncomfortable, I think, for most people.
So low speed is not exactly low speed when you consider like what the speed is relative to the surroundings, but in the tunnel it makes it seem slow.
Yeah, but one more time, this terminology almost has to change now at this point, because it's just been butchered by the wrong people so much that there's this like almost it's just the wrong interpretation for the meaning of what low speed really is. And
I think low speed does cover it to some extent, because it's your movement around in the tunnel that is fairly low, and it's getting close to as low as it can be and still fly.
Yeah, but that's the difference.
But it's not low speed when you think about how fast the wind is moving.
Absolutely not. But what I mean is, it's exactly what you just said. If the intention is to teach somebody how to move, they might move slow, but they're still learning how to execute what you've described as the basic things, right? Like carving, in face and out face, and doing layouts. That's still the intention of delivering.
But that's a segue into this thing with the half pipe now, because to me the connecting reason why I use a little bit more speed mostly in the tunnel is that I take it as a skydiving point of view, and there's certain speeds that we fly in the tunnel that is so low that you wouldn't use these in skydiving.
Yeah.
So when you jump out of the plane, you will go faster than that. So you should at least be able to handle that kind of speed if you're a skydiver.
Yeah.
But then also if you want to ride a half pipe and you want to get up to the coping or maybe even above, that cannot be done low speed.
Exactly.
So you need to figure out the way to generate power enough that you can get there. And then up there, now we can figure out what to do up there.
Once you're in the air.
Yeah, once you're like, first you have to figure out how to get there, but then now what does it mean to be there?
Perfect.
Right? And then it has this aspect that on the curves on the bottom of a half pipe, that's where you deal with the, in this case it would be the say, let's call it the gravitational forces, that you feel more pressure on the bottom. And if you reach the top or above the coping, that's where you go into what could be considered 0G.
Yeah.
And I try to achieve similar kind of thing in the tunnel.
Yeah.
So, and that could also be compared to being on a trampoline.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is very similar in the sense of going up and down all the time, right?
Absolutely.
There's no holding point.
You have the same.
You're not gonna level out.
Yeah.
We're just gonna keep moving, and then you can do what you want to do in the keeping moving idea. So based on this, it becomes just the same as a concept. Obviously not like on a half pipe you can just follow the curve, but you still need to deal with more muscle tension on the bottom than you do on top.
Sure.
Which is very similar in doing layouts or carving in that sense.
Sure.
So that's examples that I use a lot.
Yeah.
But then also how you manipulate generating tension in the body and releasing it gradually or partially like you would do with a bow, for example, right? If you
Sure.
pull a bow but you don't feel like shooting it,
Mm-hmm.
then you're gonna have to release in a safe way, right? So like
Perfect.
the idea of generating tension and manipulating the release of it in a controlled way where it's not all of it in one go. It's not explosive necessarily, but
Perfect.
more based on that you want to maintain perfect control of the distance to the net and the glass or your teammate or whoever you're flying with, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
Because I mean, obviously, as we fly higher and higher wind speed, the reaction time becomes an important part.
Yes.
And at that point, you want to know exactly how to release so that you don't change your trajectory or your speed or position or anything down to a point where you either mess up the line or you crash the partner or you stop completely or you all of a sudden face the wrong way. Or
yeah.
I experienced a lot in the States actually without really necessarily pissing on them. They seem to have a culture of not really looking out for each other in the tunnel.
Yeah, they also have a culture of bailing as soon as it doesn't feel good, look good, or whatever. They just stop.
But that to me is where it really comes in with the flying. That especially in this little tube that we use, that you really need to know exactly where you want to go from millisecond to millisecond.
Yeah.
First, in order to make it safe, but also to be efficient enough continuously.
Yeah.
So that's where I use these examples because say you're dropping from 5-10 meters down to a trampoline, you have the option of staying down.
Yeah.
You can kill the energy.
Sure.
But you can also jump back up there.
And even higher.
And even higher, right? So like you can always manipulate it to whatever the next move should be, but you cannot just expect it to work. You need to be part of it.
Absolutely.
You're not just a bowling ball coming down.
Yeah. What you've said about not pissing on the Americans, I realized that this culture that let's say is IBA, it also very much transferred to Europe because Europeans have this reputation of low speed, but nobody actually, like with an exception of like the names I mentioned, you know, like Philip and you and Mesa and Ramsey and maybe me, and of course there are several others, but very few of them. People don't really deliver knowledge, especially using the low wind speeds. So like it's mostly become a bit of a, as I call it, butchered philosophy. And so I don't even think it's so much a matter of Americans doing certain things anymore, because maybe through the tunnelinstructor.org thing that basically copied the IBA and maybe made their own thing out of it, but very much brought that philosophy of how to spot and how to bail and what to do with the students into Europe too. Europe adopted that quite a lot as well. So I actually see a lot of very bad
I think that's more
fun.
based on the dynamic competition now.
Yes.
Which is basically starting to rule out the free routine and just having the speed round, which in my world has nothing to do with fast.
Yeah.
I think it's a closer related discipline to BFS than anything else. And for me, like the interest, like we did the competition in Japan a few years back, and that was the first time I tried the new speed round, because I stopped competing 3-4 years before that, where we were more in a like figuring it out kind of mode with the group of flyers who wanted to compete.
Yeah.
Now it's more let's call it streamlined to the point where people can not know anybody who's flying and just watch it online and try and learn the lines and what you need to do, and then based on this you don't really need to learn to fly.
Yeah.
You can just do which I would consider a closer thing to VFS than what I would consider flying. And to me it became uninteresting in a way. But I think the results shows in how many people wanna become good at this discipline, and then they fast track to be able to do that.
Yeah, I wanted to also talk to you about, for example, exactly this Botrop crew. So I guess first question should be, what was so different about the Botrop people back then? When you said you went to Botrop back in the days, that was what, 2010, I guess, 2011? that you went to Botrop, and there all of a sudden you did have an interest in tunnel flying now, which you didn't have before, right? You said it wasn't interesting for you skydiving at that point when you tried it in Orlando for the first time. So firstly, what made you go to Botrop? What was the decision of saying, I'm gonna go to the tunnel now?
It's complicated, but I stopped competing in freestyle quite a while before that.
Yeah.
And then we had we called it the Boss Ventus to start with, the team here.
Yeah.
In Norway, it became the Team One call later, and Nils and I, we started doing some tunnel flying, whatever, like shortly after we finished the team. But then with this Team One call that it became, we got some funds, and then we started going around to whatever tunnels was available. And then the plan was to build a tunnel here in Voss. And back then there was no alternative really to iFly, so that was in a way the idea. But then Boris, he built the tunnel there.
Mm-hmm.
So we went to check it out and had a meeting with Boris and talked about details on basically what it would take to make something like this happen here, because that was the first tunnel of the kind.
Sure.
And
this is actually here in Voss, is the second tunnel, right? Second generation.
Yeah. So my plan with going to Botrop in a way was to, my thought was that at that point, either I'm gonna probably slowly slide away from professional skydiving and do something else, or I'm gonna go deeper into some area that allow me to keep progressing.
Yeah.
On a personal level, since we were not competing anymore, there wasn't really anything that was kind of pushing me on a daily basis. So then I thought that if I'm gonna enter tunnel flying, it's gonna have to be about now,
mm-hmm.
with my age and my position in the sport and all this. So then, kind of two-sided. I wanted to learn, but we were gonna build a tunnel here in Voss. So I needed to figure out the instructor side and the machine side of the business, so that someone here would have the experience to get started.
Okay. And then how did that thing happen where that crew back then, in those years, from like, of course Boris played an important role, he had this vision that he's gonna also push the sport, which is one of the reasons he built that tunnel, and so he made it possible for the, let's say, most interested individuals in flying to come together and progress and build some stuff such as what you described, the dynamic concepts, where it's actually much more about interaction and flying together and learning together, which nowadays, as we spoke about a bit before a few days ago, the dynamic competitions are not interested in any way. Like, it's not even about interaction, it's just somehow, okay, we even take away the free rounds now. But so what was it about this Botrop crew that worked? Like, how is it that happened? Why it doesn't exist anymore? Why don't we, like, I feel so alone in my sport, man. I feel so alone in tunnel flying, trying to push things, right? Like, I have maybe 2-3 individuals that are still really interested in building things up, and I can see, for example, Martin Dedek, who in the recent years has become such a monster now. He progressed so much, even more than what he was before, with of course the help of Philip and so on. But there are very few individuals like that really still want to just level up constantly, and he's basically doing it alone, right, with Philip. It's not even a team effort. Like, you guys had this, I think anyways, from my outside view back then when I was a rookie, you guys had this team thing going where everybody played a role and everybody pushed it. So
I think the biggest difference, or what made that possible, was that there was basically just that tunnel. So if you wanted to tunnel fly, you had to show up there.
Yeah.
That was Bedford. But then, I don't know, it's just a better tunnel.
Yeah.
It's smaller, but it's far better. And on, say, like the European continent, the only one that really made sense to fly in. So everybody came there and I guess it's a little bit like the skydiving organizing kind of crew, that if you really want to, then you somehow find your way into the core of this group.
Yeah.
You really, really have to want to, but then there's a way to get there.
Yeah.
And now there's so many tunnels that it's hard to bring that type of people to the same place often enough that it feels like it's a crew.
Yes. Because I can feel that here, for example, like now we just finished moving days in skydiving, and I feel like that crew, kind of as you described, of load organizers that we have there is that current competent set of individuals that is like good at flying.
Yeah.
If I go for a skydive with the people that were load organizing here, we can all do really cool stuff.
Yeah.
And that doesn't exist often. Like most of the events, if I go to, I cannot even do it. Like they would not be in an advanced group with me on an event like this one.
No,
so
no.
like you can't even take them for fun jumps. So I guess that's a good point. And you guys were that group all in the same place, where here we come at, let's say for the skydiving, those few individuals end up in the same event now, but we're all from different places, I suppose.
Yeah, I think that's obviously Boris set the stage for this to be possible, right? With allowing people to go fly.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, you have to work, but then you get this amount of time. And then everybody flying together made this time grow up to like, so that everybody flew quite a lot.
Yeah.
Which is the way to learn, of course. And then we would have such busy nights that if you wanted to fly your staff night, there would be this maybe 1 hour, 2 hours, some nights, and then everybody would show up.
Yeah.
Everybody would be keen enough to fly more than the demo, that they would be there, even if it would be 5 minutes of flying, right? So the motivation was super high, and everybody was keen on sharing, and everybody was fairly new at it. So it wasn't that I'm the best and you're gonna have to pay me this or something like that. It's just like, show up and we're gonna fly, like, or you can fly alone, we're gonna fly 2-way, and then we fly some 4-way or 3-way or whatever. It slowly progressed into a more kind of organized way of thinking, but basically it was just like everybody wanted to fly.
Yeah.
And those that were better, they were invited in to fly with those that was not.
Yeah.
And I would say at that point, Philip and I, we were pushing each other all the time, that we for sure started getting better to the point where we were flying a lot with everybody else too.
Yeah.
So we were just flying a lot.
But I guess this does happen on a micro scale in every individual tunnel. At least should happen and could happen, right? So why doesn't it? Because
economically now it's just not feasible, I guess. I mean, obviously that's on the business side of it, and they just greedy, most of the tunnel owners.
Yeah, but
that
still,
they don't really feel like putting money aside that could be given to themselves to create a community.
Yes.
Of good flyers. Like say here, for example, there's no focus on the instructors being the best flyers in the world.
Yes.
There's nothing to do with that business model.
Yeah.
So that's not going to happen then on its own, right?
Sure. Yeah, it's a good point. But still, I mean, most people that start working in wind tunnels, they do so because they want to actually get good at flying. That's the prime motivation.
I don't think most of them. Because that depends on what good at flying means, of course, right? Maybe better, true. But when this Botrop thing started, I think people wanted to become good at flying. Now I think that it's a cool, like a lot of people think it's a cool job.
And you can make money with it, as we said before. Like,
but that's still only like the just like the scheme on the surface that is those of us that actually ends up being able to, like teach on a high level.
Absolutely. Yeah, but that's the thing. Most people don't teach on a high level and still take money for it, right? Nowadays.
Yeah, for sure. But that's the same with the AFF, and then you have to learn to pass the levels, and then you need to learn to do 360s in the sky or something like this. So there's all levels of this, but like to actually get to the point, I think the core thing that made that possible was that there was not enough tunnels to spread people, which is what happens now.
Yeah, or you create a hotspot. So like, for example, a little bit what happened in FlySpot, that they just ended up creating an environment that was cool enough for the 3-4 individuals that were of high level.
They're one of the few tunnel businesses that has openly focused on creating a pro flyer market.
And I mean, it worked out well for them, as you can see, but it was obviously heavily possible thanks to us who actually ended up going there and being there. And you can see that that tunnel, for example, also the staff. I mean, I speak for myself in Katowice, where I spend most of my time. I think just by leading by example, we created a really cool environment, and people want to follow in the footsteps and be humble and be kind and just fly. And then
but they also have a sweet setup with the hotel rooms and the cafe and the staff allow you to do what you want, and like that. It's a package.
I speak about the staff now, right? Yeah, so it's more also about how it happened that the staff turned out to be the way they are, because they're all, even if the not so talented people, fly really good. If you go to most other tunnels in the world, there's one guy who flies okay, not even good, and the others just suck, kind of, right? So the reason that was possible in FlySpot is because we ended up going there a lot and led by example and coached the people quite a bit. So it generated, I think, the most similar environment to what you guys had in Botrop within the actual staff, because then the people that have been there for a while start flying good, and then it goes into the sharing process. And they also had staff nights back in the days. And now FlySpot has changed their focus in the last year, certainly a little bit. It's a little bit less rock and roll in skate park, and a lot more going down the road of being more business orientated, which is natural. That just happens.
All businesses will do this.
Yes, exactly. But I mean,
but I think that I agree. Like this, I mean, I don't travel to all the tunnels anymore.
Yeah.
But to the ones that I do travel to, it's definitely the one that it has the best layout for creating a setting like this.
Or especially as a coach, I mean, I also spend most of my time coaching in FlySpot. I still have an apartment in Katowice, and I feel the most comfortable of any tunnels in the world going there. And for my students especially, right, they have in Katowice even more than in Warsaw, for example. And now they're building a new tunnel in Gdansk, but Katowice has just got this insane facility in the middle of this little city that has restaurants everywhere. So you don't really get that in most places, in most tunnels in the world, because they're usually a bit isolated and far away. I mean, I remember you even much more than me spent time in St. Petersburg in Russia, where you're just in the middle of fucking absolute nowhere. Like really difficult to find food. The best thing you get is these like gas station snacks, and it's brutal. So yeah, but
but I think this, I mean, I experienced this through skydiving too, right? That I've been part of this for long enough that you see the ups and downs in the industry developing, and how it's changing both in its form and also locations where, like now for many years actually, people have been not coming to us for events, but the drop zone has been focusing on building up the AFF school and the facility in general. Now they seem like they're ready to kind of receive back and then people come back, right? And I'm sure there's other places around the world where this is the case, that it's not just linear good in this particular location. It goes around a little bit.
But yeah, and the hotspot will move, but I mean, the hotspot is also created exactly by these individuals that are in the place. So for example, FlySpot, the only reason that it became what it is because they were very kind to the right people that ended up wanting to be there a lot. So they created this environment where we want to be, as we were speaking well about them, right? And that then in turn attracts more of those kind of individuals and creates a vibe, and then eventually leads into having what you had in Botrop, even if still not as amplified, but it still does create a type of that, right? But
if you cannot create the situation where word of mouth gets to the customer, it's not gonna happen.
Exactly. Well, but still, so
if you're not gonna say this is good, the people that you're gonna bring is not gonna go there. So, and if that's not the base of it, it doesn't matter how good the staff is or the building or anything, right?
Absolutely. Well, but so having had like just to go back a bit to the dynamic flying thing, right? You guys back then generated and came up with ideas, several people, and of course doing a lot of work for that with the whole dynamic four-way at that time concepts. And the way that was structured was to have for example, meetups, like you guys had the Nordic meets, you guys had workshops four-way workshops where those individuals that played a role and that could fly well enough basically created a routine. And that a lot of elements of those routines are now what we know as our speed rounds, actually, right? And why, let me rephrase that, how bad is it for the progression of our sport, where the entire foundation of dynamic flying is based on this interaction together of building routines, which leads into progress, to now take away the entire ability and intention of building routines into this very set structure of compulsive a compulsive set of, let's say, rounds or speed rounds, taking away the entire, well, I think, the freedom and the progress of the whole thing, right? And then even worse, you were not invited to the last workshops. I was not either. Sure,
I think it was an open letter that you would have to look for, no?
Yeah, exactly. But the point is, it's not kind of what it used to be. And then those few individuals that could actually make the sport progress are so tired of the bullshit that they're just not dealing with it anymore. Same goes to competitions that, I'm just so tired of dealing with the incompetence of people that I'm just like, I've got a better time going surfing nowadays than trying to deal with their shit, right? So
I think I've always been slightly against systems or authority or whatever. Like even when we did the freestyle, to me the compulsory is absolute waste of time, and the speed round goes down that same line to me. But people tend to think that the only way to really have a fair competition is if there's something very measurable that backs up the artistic side of the discipline. To me, this is not that's more a matter of having the right kind of judging or the right kind of judges. So like the very first official, if you can call that official, competition we did four-way wise in like the Battle of Botrop in 2012. There was one from each team that was
judging and giving a score out of 10, and then there was a total.
I think this is a little bit like a backyard way of approaching it, of course, but but at least you have some peers that's gonna look at what you do and make a decision if they like it or not.
The problem is the greed, right? Everybody wants to have medals and titles, and people want world championship titles, so they start including what happened, right? The IPC, the FAI, etc., and then you need to kind of put things into words and papers and create rules that are understandable for idiots that are...
People still talking bad about the judging and the judges in what we do nowadays. Now, like when we finished freestyle, we had basically won everything the previous 5 years.
Yeah.
And I then thought like it would be respectful of me to become a judge, so that at least there's someone in the judging group that has like current knowledge on what it takes to get there. So I did the judging course in Norway, and then they afterwards told me that if I wanted to become an international judge, then I would have to do at least 2 years of national judging, and then I could be considered for international competitions. And to me that was like, I don't understand. I have more knowledge than all of you together, right? Like maybe not in your system of judging, but what it like I will be able to tell you exactly what it takes to do what each of these teams are doing, and you probably have no clue what the camouflage is doing when you're watching the video, so you can't say that this is difficult or not.
Yes.
So being told this, I just told him like, okay, but if this is how you run the show, then I'm not going to be part of it. So then I chose not to be a judge. I didn't want to be part of the IPC system. Like, I'm not that kind of person, right? I'm not going to sit there and be told what to do.
But I had exactly the same experience. Identical. I did a course. I went to a place, I traveled there, me and actually, I think we were 15 people. We all went there, we did a 3-day course, we paid money for it, we did the whole shabam. And then 2 weeks later, we all were notified that the FAI has not recognized that course. Okay, so long story short, big dramas. We continued, a few of us anyways, and then we had the same problem. Yeah, but you have to do national competitions first. I did. Dude, I judged a bunch of competitions, and then still the same. Somehow there was always an excuse why we are not going to be the judges, why this and that. And then every time I'm being bitched at, like, yeah, but you should be judging and you shouldn't be talking. I said, yeah, but I've tried, and you guys are making very damn sure that I'm not. And so it's aggravating. But you did say something valuable, that we can't discredit the judges because they are also the judges that gave me a title to be a world champion, and you too, and so we can't bitch about it too much because otherwise we discredit ourselves. But that being said, I appreciate the title, but that doesn't make them any more or less competent. It's just that I was that much better than everybody else that they just could not, and they tried. They couldn't give it to somebody else. But they tried, but they couldn't, just because I just went that far ahead, and the same with you. So I can't discredit them.
I think that's the only approach where you can have some level of certainty that you're gonna win.
Yeah.
You're just gonna. It's almost, that's where I think martial arts have a similarity, right?
Yeah.
If you want to make sure you win, you basically knock the other one out.
Yeah, but there's a difference.
Or choke or whatever.
Absolutely.
You have to make it happen yourself.
Yeah, but I can. So that's the thing. I can just go knock you out, and then you lay on the ground like a worm, and then you just maybe shake a bit until somebody wakes you up or you die. But the point is, you can't do that in flying, because if the judge just doesn't like you, they're just gonna disqualify you, or they're just gonna say, yeah, but I didn't like your right foot, and they're gonna find reasons to.
But there's some hint of being able to be enough better that it's hard for them to do that and make everybody agree.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely. Well, I have a last kind of thing that was on my mind, is the little paradox that we have, that even though we've got so many tunnels in the world now, so many people with a lot of airtime, how come there are so few competent skydivers? Because there really aren't that many. I look at videos of the Nordic meet, and obviously I could name every single person that was there and every single person I looked up to that was flying so badass, and that still most of them, at least the ones that are alive, are very badass at flying. And then this new generation now, there's very few of us that really know how to skydive. And I know a lot of okay flyers and very badass tunnel flyers, and they suck balls at skydiving. Like, you can't do shit with them, and they're so unaware and don't have any intuition, and just following keys instead of just copying what's going on at the jump, or just staying on head level. And so what went wrong, and what happened that even though people have so much airtime, they're so not that much better at skydiving than what we had 10 years ago?
I don't know, like, I can only have my ignorant way of thinking about that now, but I approach skydiving from a camouflage point of view, and everything is based around that. So when I fly with people in free fall, I would say the add-on to that is that I want to go fast.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to look at each other and move.
Yeah, but you would know how to go slow too if you had to. And you would just be in your slot. You just said it earlier, the perfect speed is being there. You're going to be there.
Yeah.
So why are people not?
No, but that's exactly my point. It's like we have to look at each other, and then that was what I was saying earlier. Like, I look through this ring when I'm skydiving, and I'm reacting to the situation.
Yeah.
Like, live, not that I'm gonna think about something else and then realize later that now I have 4 times the distance.
Yeah.
And most people are wearing a camera nowadays, but I consider that more like a security camera than actually flying the camera.
Mm-hmm.
It's just there to record if something happened.
But it's not to remember the jump.
Yeah, it's not something that's used in the jump.
Sure.
So I would say, like, even though more people have a camera on, they're not camera flyers.
Yeah.
In the sense of how you approach the flying.
Yeah.
But then I also like, when I stopped organizing in skydiving, it was when the tunnel industry kind of started developing, and I saw these like seemingly good tunnel flyers come into skydiving and making it dangerous.
Yep.
And I already, I mean, I say that it's probably wrong, but I probably have the world record in freefall collisions, being the base in a tracking jump for 15 years.
That sounds so bad.
And through this you learn to see, and you learn to figure out, obviously, how to either avoid them or to make people understand how to fly, so that this is never a thing, right?
Yeah.
But I stopped because I started hearing about people having such free fall collision that they would die or get paralyzed or, you know, like break limbs, stuff like this.
Yeah.
So I just was like, at this point, I did enough that I can pull back. There's more.
Yeah, that's the
eager
thing.
people.
There are more people coming in, but again, like
The
there
problem
aren't
with
very,
the
there
tunnel
aren't.
flyer thinks that they are good,
Yes,
but then when they start skydiving, they realize this is something else.
but it is something else. But still, like there aren't that many people that, let's say, there's as I mentioned earlier, there's a very small group of people that is actually badass at skydiving nowadays, and it's not those people that go on the big head down records and so on. Like it's like the Vincent, the Hovards, and those people. Like there aren't really like many new potential new Hovards and Martins and Vince, Refet, and so on, right? So even though we have that many more people in the sport and that much more possibility for progress and tunnel, I think one of the things is what we've been speaking about, that the progress in the tunnel is kind of shit nowadays and fake because there's just too many bad coaches. But still, there is that much potential, and yet skydivers aren't that much better. Like if I look at what the group one of the flight camp in Fly for Life does, it isn't more interesting or more impressive than what you guys were doing 10 years ago during the Nordic meet. If anything, it's significantly less impressive to me. It's just got more structure.
Yeah, like I mean, when I started the Nordic meet, I just wanted to do what I wanted to do. It was based on a egoistic approach to this week. We are gonna do what I tell you. If you wanna do what you wanna do together with me, then you pick a time where we can do that. But this week we're gonna do what I wanna do.
Yeah.
And then I just try to invite friends.
Yeah.
The skill level wasn't that important. It was more important that we were friends coming together and then experimenting with stuff. No?
Mm-hmm.
My stuff.
Exactly.
And then over the years it got a lot better to the point where it was probably the best of the free flyers that did this type of flying that came together from the whole world now.
Mm-hmm.
And this doesn't really seem to be a thing now.
It is not.
The group comes together, but they are organizing an event, so they're never really jumping together. They're not experimenting with new things.
I've actually obviously heavily inspired by the Nordic meet. I've organized one such event quite a few years ago now. I believe it was in 2016, 17 maybe, 2015, even 16, who knows. I organized an event in Spain that was very much that idea, but the problem is that I just like to send it pretty hard and not have structure on the jump, so the whole event actually just ended up turning out in mayhem, everybody just going ballistic and punching holes in the sky. And that's what I like to do, so it was perfect, but I haven't organized it since, not sure why, and I guess I could ask you the same, right? And I know you know my answer, and I know your answer why you haven't organized it again.
I mean I did, I think we did 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt that, but at that point I kind of started moving into the tunnel flying far more than so my focus shifted a little bit, and I guess that it became a little bit like it started approaching a little bit this drama queen kind of thing.
Exactly.
That I'm really good, so I want to do this and that, and I started pulling back because I didn't want to have the like the discussions about what we're gonna do and how we're gonna do it.
Yeah, and just people being butthurt all the time.
And we started experimenting with some interesting things that kind of came a bit from the tunnel, and we try and do it in the sky, and it was interesting to spend a week with a high level group achieving a goal, but what we ended up actually doing wasn't what I wanted to do. So then to me that was the end of the project in a sense.
Yeah.
If I would do it again, I don't know, but in case that would happen, it would be smaller groups.
Yeah.
And based more on the skill level that say you and I have in the tunnel, and then not do tunnel stuff in the sky, but the skill level needs to be there to do the things I would want to do.
Yeah.
And it's not like it's not already in my head, but I mean, it sounds ridiculous now, but I only did it 1 week a year, and every week of the year I would have people write me emails or whatever means to ask if they could participate, and I just didn't feel like saying I couldn't give a shit, like no,
Yeah.
or what's the nice way to say, like it's full, or it's not a bookie, or you're not invited, or this, like it's not an event. We're just some people coming together.
Yeah,
to
but
have
there,
fun.
but that's also then in that case, unfortunately, like of course it's really cool to share and show what you do, but then the moment you give it a name, and you make it an event, a yearly thing, people will assume that it's potentially possible to come, and then also, this might sound arrogant, but I feel people have such a misconcept of their own skills. Like it's like
Genuinely.
it's like people asking about the race that we're doing in Abu Dhabi. It's like, bro, I don't want to fly in the tunnel there with you. Like,
No.
like what do you mean? There is 4 people in the world that I feel comfortable being in there with.
Yeah.
And that's because we charge, and I've had enough talks now about people talking about, yeah, but you can be like 10 people. It's like, no, you cannot if you start to move.
Yeah.
Like, if you're 2 people, it's already sketchy. If we're doing the race in there, like, exactly as you say, I can count the people that I want to be in there with on 2 hands. So it's like, I feel like a lot of people are not quite aware, or they don't quite understand how much we have actually put into flying, like how many hours and like how many hours we've put into this, how many jumps we have, how many books we've read, how much knowledge we've acquired to be where we are. And I feel like people just come in kind of with a skateboarding mentality. It's like, yeah, but I can just do that. And it's like, yeah, but the thing is, you just can't. It doesn't just work that way.
Well, I think I mean I feel that I disconnected from the skydiving scene long enough ago, that I'm not connected enough to know what it is or what's missing, or what it would take to get back there or something like this. I obviously still skydive quite a bit. I do some level coaching and my own thing, but not enough to know like what's happening around, and
Yeah.
what is the reason why it's not progressing, or is it progressing in a like, there might be some people out there that think like this is going down the perfect track, where I would consider it not progressing, maybe. I don't know.
Can we talk about the fact that there is a competition now coming up where there is no free routine for 2-way and 4-way dynamic flying, and there is a free routine for solo speed? Or should we just accept that it's just going downhill?
Like what I say to my wife, who has been involved with the backside of quite a few competitions, who is not so fond of the solo thing. I'm not gonna compete in the tunnel again. I obviously I cannot say never, but in my world, I just think like, let them fuck it up.
Yeah.
Let them fuck it up completely, and that group is gonna go down that road, and then I'm sure another group of people is gonna come up with some new interesting thing that is gonna be whatever the best flyers wanna do, right?
I've reached the same thing at this point also.
I'm not gonna spend my energy on trying to correct people who think they're going the right direction.
I've tried. I've wasted a lot of energy. I am getting to the point of just not giving a fuck anymore.
No.
Yeah, as I said, I have so many cooler things I can do with my time.
Yeah, no, I think the because it's almost like a new generation who is competing now.
Yeah.
And they haven't. I'm sure there's still people that are competing who was part of the beginning of this, but the majority didn't.
Yeah.
And they just think that it's a nice discipline to be part of.
But it is, but like it's also really unfortunate, because look at this, for example, like the last World Championships in the tunnel, obviously freestyle was a big focus because it's something easy to understand and whatnot, and the big battle was between the lead flyers of the freestyle that was at that point this year was Maya and Toms and Kira, kind of, right? So the podium was so obviously decided already. And Maya should have won by so much, but then obviously didn't. And I understand that at this point, if like, I highly doubt she will do another tunnel competition. Like, what's the interest? She puts her heart and effort into that, does something that's actually pretty badass, and then like she can go in there already just knowing what's gonna happen. So I get it. It's exactly as you say. Like, let them fuck it up. They're doing it beautifully. And to be fair, like, there's still all the others doing fantastic things too, right? Like, I don't want to discredit anybody at all. Like, Kira flies amazing, for example. Tom flies incredible, and so on.
Yeah, I'm not saying anything about the personal level.
Exactly.
It's more like the organization that's behind, that's letting the whatever we can think, like we made an amazing whatever competition concept, but it's nothing to do with this anymore.
Yeah.
So it evolved enough away from it, or downgraded, or degraded, whatever you would say, away from what it was, that to me it's not interesting anymore. I'm not interested in competing enough to do that.
Yeah, but now with all the things we've spoken about, and especially also the idea of martial arts, like our race thing, or actually yours and Philip's race concepts, that
That's definitely Philip's.
Yeah, well, it's that's gonna be interesting again, because it's gonna bring hopefully a small element of violence and martial arts in there. It's like, there's no more bullshit talking now. If I push you and you bail, it's not my problem. If you hit the wall really hard and break your shoulder, it's like, yeah, then just fly better.
Yeah,
And I look so forward to that, man.
It's gonna have an aspect of being approved to be part.
Yes.
You can't just sign up.
Yes.
That's for sure.
Yeah, but then it's also dangerous, because you set the room for potentially. Like, we have to be careful how you kind of test people, approve people to join, because very quickly it's gonna become a thing. It's like, yeah, but we don't like you, or you're not cool enough, or this or that, right? Like, it should. There needs to be kind of like a.
So it's gonna have some of that when it's grassroots building up.
Yeah, probably.
Like a new thing.
Probably.
There will be a level of, I don't know who you are,
even
though you might be good enough. If I would be organizing it, I would feel some level of responsibility if someone gets hurt.
Yeah.
Like, I went to the hospital with one of us when we were in Abu Dhabi, you know, just because.
That was also my favorite moment. It's like having a meeting with the guys, telling them we're gonna be all safe. And the first session, the first 5 minutes, we sent somebody to the hospital. That was kind of making a statement.
Yeah, it's just it's bound to happen. But so if you're gonna know this is gonna happen, then at least it's nice to know who's there.
Absolutely.
Right, so that in the beginning, until there's some level of, you can kind of expect what's gonna happen, then you can know, like, this person that I don't really know is vetted by all of these other people. He or her or whatever, like, it's gonna be good. Okay. But yeah, I think in this case it's gonna be more important that you cannot be a junior in a senior competition, for example.
Perfect.
Like these kind of things, right? Like now, if you don't want to be a junior, you can participate in the senior. If you're freestyling or whatever it is, because you're not competing against anybody. You're just in there on your own, but you're actually competing against everybody else in the race. So everybody's going. If you participate in a competition, you should be compatible. You know, like.
Yeah.
So in the moment of a choice, should I pull back or speed up, you're probably gonna push the person away to be able to speed up, right?
Perfect. Yeah.
Because now you're not the friend anymore.
Absolutely.
Like this year, I'm gonna Nils and I are gonna do the freestyle world championship. No, the World Cup, and we're just gonna go have fun. We're not gonna be able to do enough training jumps to even
I hope
consider.
everybody understands the importance of this, just in case you guys didn't hear that properly, that Martin and Niels are gonna compete again.
We're gonna that's the thing with the word compete, we're gonna enter the competition.
Yeah.
But we're not gonna compete. If we
You're gonna participate.
have time to do compulsories, we're gonna spend some jumps doing it, but we're just gonna try and make a nice free routine, and that's it now. So
as you told me, you just want to jump with him again as well.
Yeah, we're not gonna do it to compete. We're gonna enter the competition.
Yeah.
And hopefully have fun doing it.
Cool. Let's stop on this note. It's 1 a.m. Let's go sleep. Thank you.